Chapter 1892. After wandering around the area for a while, Lu Yi became more and more annoyed. There were so many good things, but he didn't have enough Azura seals to exchange for them. He steeled his heart, clenched his teeth and left. What the eye doesn't see, the heart doesn't grieve over. It wouldn't be too late to squander them, when he had enough Azura seals in the future. A moment later, Lu Yi arrived at the large square. He wandered around the city square where cultivators gathered. There were many good things here. The good thing was that the transactions here did not require the use of the Azura seal. The bad thing was that all the goods here were more expensive than outside, especially those that could be used to heal injuries and such. After walking around for a while, Lu Yi lost interest. There was no way to pick up anything cheap in this Azura's treasure house. Even if a cultivator found a treasure that they did not recognize, they would only need to spend some time to find the corresponding item in the treasure house, and then evaluate its value. He returned to his cave, and took out the jade slip that Gui had given him before she left, and carefully looked through it. This was information about the Azura realm that Gui had sorted out herself. There were even many things that she had dealt with during her training. It could be said that this information was very valuable. Lu Yi was confident in his own strength, but there was nothing wrong with being careful. In this vast cultivation world, was it rare to see a moment of carelessness cause one to fail miserably? The information recorded in the jade slip was very rich, but Lu Ye's investigation speed was very fast, and he finished it in less than an hour. There was nothing else to prepare. Since he had come to the Azura realm, it was naturally more important to quickly earn Azura seals. He couldn't count on the Azura realm's treasures, but those that could improve the quality of his source were not to be missed. This was also Lu Ye's main goal. Lu Yi first spent 100,000 spirit jades to exchange for 10,000 Azura seals. This was a benefit that every cultivator who had just entered the Azura realm could obtain. Although 10,000 Azura seals wasn't much, it was still meat. The method of exchange was very simple, and he could complete it in his own cave. He poured his magic power into the Azura seals, and thought about his intentions. A ball of white light immediately appeared in front of him, and after he threw in 100,000 spirit jades, the white light disappeared. Next, Lu Yi checked his Azura command, and saw that there was an additional 10,000 Azura seals stored inside. Lu Yi activated the Azura command again and muttered, "Battle Arena." Another ball of white light appeared in front of him, and then it turned into an oval-shaped door that could allow one person to pass through. Lu Yi didn't hesitate and walked in. Chen Xianhai had specifically reminded him that the first thing he should do after entering the Azura arena was not to rush into the training grounds. Instead, he should strive for the highest ranking in the battle arena. This was one of the ways for cultivators to obtain Azura seals in the Azura arena. Additionally, there were also some special benefits that could not be obtained from the training grounds. Among them, by Ant-TTTT. If one could obtain a high ranking in the battle arena, one would not only obtain fame, but also practical benefits. The ranking in the battle arena would be calculated every 2 months, and according to the ranking of the cultivators, they would receive a corresponding number of Azura seals as a reward. The higher the ranking, the more Azura seals they would receive. Take the battle arena of the Moon Jade realm as an example. If one could rank in the top 10, they would receive at least 30,000 Azura seals as a reward, and the first place would receive 200,000 Azura seals. If he added a little more, he would be able to exchange for a Bodhi fruit. Furthermore, there was a special rule in the battle arena, and that was that no one would die in the battles here. As a result, any cultivator who participated in the battles would not have to worry about the consequences, which would stimulate the cultivator's enthusiasm for the battles. This place should be where the Heavenly Azura clan trained their clansmen in the past, and that was why there was such a special rule. It could be said that some of the cultivators in the Azura realm might not participate in the training, because their lives might be in danger, but they definitely wouldn't be absent from the battle arena. Another rule was that if someone could continuously occupy the first place and accumulate a certain number of times, they would be able to enjoy a discount when exchanging for resources in the Azura treasury. Compared to the Azura Seal reward, this reward was undoubtedly more difficult to obtain. Lu Yi was naturally not unfamiliar with this competition, and it could even be said that he was very familiar with it. This was because he had experienced something similar in the Spirit Stream battlefield of the 9 states. This was not strange. When the ancestors of the 9 states created the Heaven's Fate Plate, they must have borrowed many of the rules of the Azura realm, just like how many of the unique treasures in the 9 states could be found in the starry sky. The difference was that the strength of the Lu Yi of the past and the current him was as different as heaven and earth. His figure passed through the door, and Lu Yi's vision changed, but he did not immediately appear in the battle arena. Instead, he heard the clamorous sounds of competition mixed with various kinds of explosions, which made one's blood boil, and could not help but imagine the scene of 2 armies clashing. Urgently, a loud and clear voice sounded in his ears. Who will be the king of the army? Who will be the hero of the 100 barges? The battle Tao has existed since ancient times, and we cultivators will never retreat. Fight! 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 Accompanying the voice was the beating of war drums and the buzzing of bugles. The voice gradually faded into the distance and then disappeared. Lu Yi's vision cleared, and he appeared in a sealed environment. The corners of his eyes could not help but twitch slightly. The sound just now should have been produced by the Azura realm, and it seemed to have the effect of bewitching the mind. No matter who it was, after experiencing such a thing, they would most likely be filled with fighting spirit. This was a dilapidated city, as if it had been ravaged by the fierce flames of war. There were broken walls everywhere, and the edges of the dilapidated city were covered by a curtain of light visible to the naked eye. This was undoubtedly the restriction of the battle arena. The place where he appeared was on one side of the battle arena, and a few dozen kilometers away, there was another figure standing there. It was undoubtedly his opponent this time. Lu Yi was just about to size up his opponent when he saw his opponent's figure flicker and strangely disappear. He immediately understood that his opponent this time was a ghost cultivator who had used a secret technique to hide his figure. He did not know where he was hiding. He was not in a hurry to search, because this was the first time he had entered the battle arena, so the opponent he would encounter would not be too strong. It was very likely that his opponent was only at the early stage of Yu Yao. He calmly took out his Azura seal and immersed his consciousness into it. The information recorded inside had changed. Apart from the 10,000 Azura seals that had appeared before, there was another piece of information. Battle Arena Ranking. Yu Yao 533,572. Lu Yi raised his eyebrows. This undoubtedly meant that there were more than 530,000 Yu Yao still lingering in the Azura realm. Because he was definitely ranked last on the Yu Yao side, this number was basically the same as the number of Yu Yao. There was not much difference. This was undoubtedly an extremely shocking number. So many Yu Yao could never be seen on the 10,000 Myriad Sea. The local forces of the 10,000 Myriad Sea would never allow so many Yu Yao to remain. Just as he put away the Azura seal, a wisp of killing intent bloomed from the side. Without a doubt, that ghost cultivator had taken advantage of this opportunity to sneak up on him and launch a sneak attack. Lu Yi did not move. He only raised his hand slightly, and the mountain plate saber at his waist was already unsheathed. Following the collision of magic power, a cry of alarm rang out, and blood splattered everywhere. To the side, the thin and weak ghost cultivator was clutching his neck. His face was filled with terror as he retreated, blood gushing out from his neck. In that instant, he truly felt the descent of death. It could be said that if the battle arena's rules hadn't protected him, his head would definitely have been separated from his body by now. Apart from being terrified, he was even more depressed. He had not been in the Azura realm for long, and this was the 9th battle he had experienced. The previous few battles were not so bad. Although the opponents he encountered were stronger than him, he still had some leeway to deal with them. After all, he was a ghost cultivator, and he was very proficient in this aspect. He had never imagined that the opponent he encountered this time would be so terrifying. He was only thankful that he was in the battle arena. If he was in a training environment, facing such an opponent, no matter how many lives he had, it would not be enough. His figure dimmed, In the final moments before he retreated from the battle arena, he did his best to open his eyes wide and look in Lu Ye's direction. He wanted to imprint this figure into the depths of his mind, because who knew when they would meet again? The ghost cultivator's figure dissipated. Although he did not die on the spot under the protection of the battle arena's rules, the injuries he suffered were real and should take a while to recover. When the ghost cultivator's figure disappeared, Lu Yi also noticed a wonderful force wrapped around his body. Then the surrounding environment quickly changed. His vision blurred, and he returned to his own immortal's cave. Recalling the moment just now, when he slashed at his opponent's neck, there was obviously a sudden force that blocked the mountain blade, making him unable to slash again. The power of a starry sky treasure was indeed extraordinary. Moreover, this protection for the cultivators participating in the battle was also very interesting. This would undoubtedly give the cultivators a more perfect experience during the battle, without any worries. He did not know whether the Azura Realm's treasure had this ability. If it did, the treasure's value would be too great. If he could bring it back to the 9 regions, the cultivators of the 9 regions could rely on it to quickly accumulate a large amount of battle experience. Moreover, it was the kind of real-life and death battle experience. Checking his Azura token, there wasn't much of a change in the ranking. Previously, it was at 533,572, but now it was at 533,569, an increase of only 3 places. Lu Yi thought about it for a moment and understood why there was such a change. It was not because he had defeated the ghost cultivator just now. When participating in the battle arena for the first time, only after 10 battles could one get their real ranking. The ranking before 10 battles was not accurate. The Azura realm would draw up an initial ranking according to the cultivator's performance in these 10 battles. The better the performance, the higher the initial ranking. This was one of the rules of the battle arena. The reason why there was a rise of 3 places undoubtedly meant that in that short period of time, 3 Yu Yaos had left the Azura realm or died. End of this chapter. Chapter 1893. In the boundless desert filled with sand and wind, 2 figures flew past each other. The instant they crossed paths, magic power collided, and the sound of metal clashing rang out. Immediately afterward, blood splattered, and one of them cursed loudly, "Azura Arena, F***ck your ancestors." There was no justice in this world. Why did they arrange such a powerful opponent for him? They were both weapon cultivators, but the opponent's cultivation was 1 level higher than his, and his strength was also so terrifying. He had used all his strength, but he couldn't even take a simple strike from the opponent. Even though he knew that some cultivators who had just arrived here were unfathomably powerful, he still found it hard to accept that he had actually encountered one. As soon as he finished speaking, the cultivator's figure disappeared. The scenery around him shattered, and Lu Yi returned to his cave abode. He picked up the Azura token and checked it. Battle Arena Ranking. Yu Yao 53, 621. That battle just now was the 10th battle he had experienced here. After the 10th battle, this ranking would be his initial ranking in the battle arena. The opponents he had encountered were not strong, and could even be said to be very weak. Basically, none of them could withstand a single strike from his saber. Lu Yi was not surprised by this, and he was not complacent. A ranking of over 50,000 was not low in the entire battle arena of the Yu Yao realm, but it was naturally not enough for him. He only had one goal, and that was to rank first on the Yu Yao ranking. He continued to participate in the battles without stopping. Although he had experienced 10 battles, they were not even a warm-up for him. He hadn't even stretched his muscles. Now that he had his own ranking, he had 2 options for participating in the battles. The first option was to directly enter the battle arena. The battle arena would randomly arrange an opponent for him, and depending on his performance during the battle, his ranking would increase or decrease. Of course, regardless of whether his ranking increased or decreased, the change would not be too great. There was also another method, that was to directly challenge the cultivators ranked ahead of them. There was a limit to this challenge. The challenger could only challenge those who were within 1,000 spots of each other. If the challenger won, They would take the challenger's place while the loser would fall by one spot. Lu Yi pondered for a moment before choosing the second option. Even if he chose the first option, his ranking would not increase by too much after he won. So he might as well choose the second option and increase his ranking by 1,000 with each victory. Lu Yi, who was immersed in the Azura order, immediately saw the complete Lunar Jade list. There were over 500,000 names on it. First there was the ranking, then there was the name of each cultivator. After the name, there was the region or star system where the cultivator was from. Finally, there was the battle record of the cultivator in the arena. For example, Lu Ye's information on the Yu Yao ranking. 53,621, Lu Yi, realm of the 9, Yu Yao of the Yu Yao realm. However, Lu Ye's realm of the Yu Yao realm and Yu Yu's name. But Yu Yao realm, Yu Yu, and Lu, Yu 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 Yu, Yu, Yu 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 Yu, Yu 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 Yu, Yu 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 Yu, Yu, Yu Yu Wei Yu 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 of the Yu 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 E, Yu Yu, Yu 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 E, Yu Yu E Yu Yu, Yu 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 Yu. He shifted his gaze upward and began to challenge the cultivator ranked in the top 1,000. However, when he issued the challenge, there was no response. This undoubtedly meant that the cultivator who was being challenged was not in the heavenly Azura realm. He should be in a training environment. This was a common occurrence. When faced with such a situation, Lu Yi would either wait for his opponent to return or change his target. Of course, he chose the second option. He once again challenged the cultivator, who was ranked 999 in front of him. But in the end he still failed. Lu Yi took another step back. This time he finally succeeded. Moreover, the other party didn't make Lu Yi wait for too long. Even though according to the rules, the other party had an hour to prepare. The door to the battlefield opened again, and Lu Yi stepped inside. 10 breaths later, Lu Yi returned. The cultivators ranked around 50,000 were all Moon Jade intermediate stage cultivators. They weren't much stronger than the opponents he had faced so far, so it wasn't difficult for him to deal with them. A single challenge had raised his ranking by almost 1,000 places. Basically, once Lu Yi issued a challenge, the challengers would quickly accept it. Occasionally, there would be a few cultivators who dilly-dallied, waiting for the half-hour time limit to prepare before entering the battle arena. This was not a big deal. In just a little over a day, Lu Ye's ranking jumped from 50,000 to 10,000. Now that the rankings had reached this level, the rules for the challenges had changed once again. The number of challengers had changed from within the top 1,000 to within the top 100. Additionally, the preparation time for the challengers had also increased from 1 hour to 2 hours. This was undoubtedly a way for the cultivators to better display their abilities in the fighting arena. As for the cultivators ranked at this level, their strength had clearly undergone a significant change. Within the top 10,000, most of them were late Moon Jade stage cultivators. Very few of them were mid-Moon Jade stage cultivators. The few mid-Moon Jade stage cultivators were undoubtedly capable of fighting above their cultivation level. Lu Yi chose his target. It was an opponent from the Three-Yang realm called Che-Chi. He was at the late stage of Yu Yao's cultivation and had a record of 760 victories. His win rate was around 60%. The door to the battle arena opened. Lu Yi stepped in and appeared in the battle arena. He immediately noticed that the battle this time was different from the previous ones, because there was a layer of spectator stands outside the huge sealed battle arena. On the spectator stands, there were a few figures of cultivators sitting and watching the battle. There had been dozens of battles in the past, but there had never been any spectators. This time, however, there were. Lu Yi was already familiar with this scene, so he was not surprised. Moreover, according to the information he had obtained from Chun Xianhai, these spectators were not just there to watch the show. They could also place bets in the battle arena. They were not limited to spirit jades or Azura seals. If one side won, then the many cultivators who placed their bets could split the bets of the cultivators who lost. The jade slip that Gue Yi had given him also mentioned this. However, Gue Yi had advised him not to participate. Since ancient times, many people had taught the world a bloody lesson that anything related to gambling was not a good thing. You might be able to enjoy glory for a while, but there would always be a time when you would lose everything. The end result of betting on luck was to lose everything. Lu Yi wanted to participate because he was very confident in his own strength. Unfortunately, the rules of the battle arena forbade both sides from participating in the bet. At this time, somewhere to the east of the spectator stands, there was a beautiful woman with a voluptuous figure. Just by looking at her makeup and clothes, anyone would think that this woman should have a docile and dignified personality. But in fact, although she was wearing a palace dress, she sat there with a golden saber in her hand, one hand on the armrest of the chair next to her, the other on her knee. Her body leaned forward slightly, a pair of eyes faintly bloodshot, constantly moving between the figures of Lu Yi and Che Qi in the battle. There was a thoughtful expression on her face, as if she was judging the strength of these two people. Next to her was a petite and cute girl. At this moment, this petite girl was hugging the woman's arm, a pleading look on her face. "Honorable master, you can't gamble anymore. The Azura seals you worked so hard to accumulate are almost gone." The woman was too lazy to listen to her. Reaching out, she pulled the petite girl into her arms and stopped her with one hand. The petite girl suddenly felt her face being covered by softness, and even her breathing became difficult. She couldn't help but struggle. The woman watched for a while and couldn't help but scratch her head in annoyance. Suddenly, a whimpering sound rang out. Only then did she remember her disciple, and quickly let go. The petite girl broke free and took deep breaths, her face flushed red. The woman asked, "Good disciple, look at these two. Which one will win?" The petite girl felt wronged. "Honorable master, if you can't see it, how can I? Let's go. Don't be long-winded. Didn't honorable master teach you to pick yourself up from where you fell? Honorable master can't see it because honorable master's gambling luck is bad. It has nothing to do with anything else. If you help me choose this time, I will definitely win." Sitting in the stands, she couldn't see the specific information of the two sides fighting in the arena. Moreover, there was the isolation of the arena, so even if the woman had Sunshine's cultivation, it was difficult to determine who was stronger before the two people below started fighting. "Hurry up and choose, there isn't much time left," the woman urged. The petite girl also knew what kind of person her honorable master was. She was good at everything, but her gambling habit was too heavy. Often she would lose everything she had. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that she was the poorest sunshine in the entire starry sky. Unable to dissuade her, the petite girl could only accept her fate. However, asking her to choose an opponent to bet on was undoubtedly a bit difficult for her. This was related to the last bit of her honorable master's wealth, so she could only grit her teeth and point in a direction. "Then let's choose him." The woman asked why. This was the most troublesome point for the petite girl. Honorable master often asked her to help choose an opponent to bet on, but she also wanted her to explain the reason. She didn't have any reason, so she just casually pointed. Thinking about it, she asked, "Is this one younger?" The woman glanced at her unhappily. "What's so good about being younger? Only you little girls like to judge people by their appearance. Remember, the older the ginger, the spicier." The petite girl didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She was already a few hundred years old, yet her honorable master still called her a little girl. The woman had already made a decision and waved her jade hand. "I choose the older one." The petite girl was speechless. "If that's the case, then what's the point of letting me choose who to bet on?" In the battle arena, Lu Yi quietly waited, also observing his opponent. At this level of ranking, the battle wouldn't begin immediately after entering the battle arena. Instead, there would be around 30 breaths of time to wait. This was most likely to allow those spectators to place their bets. Only after 30 breaths of time could the two sides participate in the battle freely. Soon 30 breaths passed. After Lu Yi noticed that the force restricting her had disappeared, she immediately rushed forward. End of chapter. Chapter 1894. At the same time that Lu Yi made his move, his opponent also reacted. As his transcendence energy fluctuated, 3 great suns suddenly appeared behind him, illuminating the entire battlefield. Under the scorching sun, Che Qi's aura rose steadily. With a raise of his hand, A sea of fire burned the sky, and huge fireballs appeared under the cover of the sea of fire. This move showed that he was different from Luya's previous opponents. As expected of a cultivator ranked in the top 10,000, he did have some skill. On the spectator stand, the woman who had already placed her bet laughed out loud when she saw this. She scooped up her disciple and kissed her smooth and tender face. She said happily, "I knew it. This guy is from the Three Yang realm." She couldn't see much from the spectator stand, but Che-Chi's attire gave her some clues. Although the Three Suns realm wasn't a top-tier realm, it was still a relatively famous large-scale realm. This realm was surrounded by three suns, so it was called the Three Suns realm. Most cultivators in this realm cultivated the fire element, and because of their unique environment, their individual strength was quite good. This was why she had placed her bet on him, not because he was young or old. Both were late-stage Yu Yao cultivators, but one was from a realm like the Three Suns realm, while the other was not from a top-tier realm, so there was basically no hope of victory. Moreover, one was a weapon cultivator, and the other was a magic cultivator. In such a spacious battle space, it would take a lot of effort for the weapon cultivator to reach the magic cultivator. At this moment, the entire arena was overturned by a sea of fire, and there was not a single piece of land left untouched. Ferocious spells were also flying toward Lu Yi. The woman wasn't the only one who felt that Che-Chi's victory was assured. Almost all the spectating cultivators felt the same. But soon, the woman's smile stiffened, and her beautiful eyes widened. She exclaimed, "Why?" That young weapon cultivator wasn't affected by such ferocious spells at all. This didn't make sense. But soon the woman reacted. This guy's magic power is also of the fire element. She had already seen the traces of Lu Ye's magic power. Although it wasn't very conspicuous in the bright light of the spells, she still saw it clearly. But something still didn't feel right. Even if this young weapon cultivator also cultivated the fire element, he shouldn't have been able to deal with it so easily. Did he have some treasure that could restrain the fire element? The woman fell into deep thought. Saber light flashed, and the huge fireball suddenly collapsed. In the fighting arena, the young soldier cultivator's figure was like an arrow leaving the bowstring, cleaving through the waves. Che-Chi's many exquisite techniques could not stop him at all. The distance between the two sides quickly shortened, causing the spectators to exclaim in surprise. Everyone knew what would happen if a Dharma cultivator were to get close to an armament cultivator. Che-Chi had a bad feeling. He'd experienced 1,000 or 2,000 battles in this battlefield, and the enemies he'd encountered were both strong and weak. He possessed an extremely abundant amount of battle experience, but there had never been a single one that could give him such a strong sense of oppression. If the other party was already like this before he even got close to him, what would happen if he really got close to him? Che-Chi's magical techniques didn't cease. With a flip of his hand, he summoned a magical treasure that looked like a copper ring. His magic power surged, and the copper ring transformed into a ring of fire that shot forward to block Lu Ye's path. After the ring of fire appeared, it split into 2, then 4, then 8. In just a few breaths of time, more than half of the fighting arena was covered by these dense rings of fire. No matter which direction Lu Yi came from, he couldn't avoid the attacks of these rings of fire. Che-Chi had originally hoped that this magic treasure would be able to slightly obstruct his opponent, but the result had greatly disappointed him. His opponent was like an unreasonable ancient ferocious beast. Once it had set its sights on its target, it would not make any changes. Rumbling sounds continued to ring out. It was the explosion of rings of fire, mixed with the buzzing of magical techniques. Powerful shockwaves swept in all directions, but they couldn't stop the opponent's attack at all. Wherever Lu Yi passed, the fighting arena was a mess. In an instant, he was already in front of Che-Chi. Che-Chi also tried to dodge, but his speed was not inferior to his opponent's at all, making his dodging and retreating look extremely clumsy. A bright saber light flashed in his field of vision, and Che-Chi's hair stood on end. Without thinking, he summoned a protective magical treasure to protect himself. However, in the next moment, his face changed greatly because he clearly felt that when the opponent's long saber slashed down, the power of the protective magical treasure he relied on was greatly reduced, and even showed signs of breaking. This saber, how terrifying was it? With such a huge force, even if he forcibly urged his magic power to stabilize his body, he was still sent flying like a kite. It was certain that if he hadn't summoned a protective magical treasure at the critical moment, he would have been defeated by the opponent's saber. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed that the opponent was following him like a shadow, and the long saber seemed to be raised high again. "I admit defeat." Che-Chi no longer hesitated and hurriedly shouted. Although such a battle, no matter how fierce it was, would not be life-threatening, and the fighting arena would protect his life at a critical moment. If the opponent's saber fell, his protective magical treasure would definitely break. Knowing that he was no match, he certainly didn't want to lose a magical treasure. Taking the initiative to admit defeat and retreat was the right response. As soon as these words fell, Che-Chi's figure disappeared, and Lu Ye's saber didn't cut down again. The flames in the sky converged, and Lu Ye disappeared along with them. In the stands, the originally excited woman collapsed in her chair, her eyes losing their light, as if she had experienced 1,000 humiliations. "Master," the petite woman called out softly. The woman didn't respond, like a dead fish. "Sigh." The petite woman sighed. She knew this would be the end, and she had seen this scene many times. After waiting quietly for a while, the woman said weakly, "Let's go back." "Oh." The petite girl complied. Then, she stretched out her hand and grabbed her master's arm. With a thought, they returned to the cave together. Then she placed her master, who seemed to have lost her soul, on a jade bed at the side. Because she had experienced it many times, the petite woman wasn't too worried about her master's condition. She knew that it wouldn't be long before her master would pull herself together and participate in the Azura arena to earn Azura seals. Then return to the fighting arena or the treasure house to gamble on her luck. After losing the bet, she would become like this, and the cycle would repeat. Suddenly, the woman jumped up from the bed and cursed. "How did that bastard weapon cultivator win? How did he win?" She shouted again. "Don't let this queen know who he is or I will kill him." "Yes, yes." The petite girl nodded at the side. There was one more person on the list that her master wanted to kill. After all these years, there were at least 800 people on that list, if not 1,000. However, her master only talked about it. She really didn't go and find trouble with anyone. Firstly, master's personality wasn't like this. And secondly, the Azura arena wouldn't allow Rizhao to bully the weak. But then again, master, that weapon cultivator is very strong, the petite woman said. That's definitely not his real ranking. The woman nodded. I can see that. That bastard weapon cultivator should be from the Azura arena. He's here to fight. Che-Chi, who was ranked in the top 10,000, was defeated so easily. Obviously, that weapon cultivator didn't use his full strength. If he did, who knows how strong he would be. As the master and disciple were talking, the petite woman suddenly picked up her Azura token and said, "Master, someone wants to challenge me." "Go." The woman collapsed on the bed again, lying there with her arms and legs spread out, silently feeling the pain of losing the bet. The petite woman responded. She didn't need to prepare anything, and directly entered the battle arena. In the sealed space of the battle arena, she slowly appeared, and immediately looked in the direction of her opponent. Although she didn't know who was challenging her, and how strong he was, she might be able to see something after waiting for 30 breaths of time. Looking over, she couldn't help but widen her eyes, and let out a soft gasp. Because the opponent who challenged her looked extremely familiar. He had a very young face, and wore a black and red windbreaker on the outside. There was a long blade at his waist, and he looked extremely capable. Isn't this the weapon cultivator who caused Master to lose the bet? The petite woman didn't think that such a coincidental thing would happen. The other party actually came to challenge her. However, if he thought about it carefully, it was not strange, because that Che-Chi from the Three Suns realm was ranked a few hundred places behind him. According to the rules of the top 100, after the soldier cultivator defeated Che-Chi, he only needed to win a few more matches to challenge his ranking. After seeing with her own eyes how the other party defeated Che-Chi, the woman knew that she was no match for the other party. Because her strength wasn't much different from Che-Chi's, she would definitely lose this battle. Even so, the woman had no intention of backing down. Just as she was about to fight with all her strength, she couldn't help but think of Master's appearance after losing the bet. Master is so pitiful. At the same time, Lu Yi was also observing his opponent this time. His opponent was called Walnut, and he didn't know if it was a fake name or his real name. He was from the nether floating world, and like him, was at the late stage of Yu Yao. Lu Yi didn't know much about the nether floating world, but there was a nether floating island in the Wanxiang Sea, and it had some trade relations with the three-world island. It was a high-grade spiritual island and was very good. Looking at it this way, the nether floating world's foundation couldn't be too weak. Even if his opponent was a woman, Lu Yi didn't think too much about it. Since he was in the battle arena, he had to give it his all in every battle. There was no such thing as showing mercy just because she was a woman. The 30 breaths of waiting time passed very quickly. The moment he regained his freedom, Lu Yi dashed towards his opponent as usual. Opposite him, Walnut didn't have anything on him, and he didn't seem to belong to any sect. What made Lu Yi puzzled was that his opponent's expression was clearly very conflicted, as if he was hesitating about something. It wasn't until Lu Yi was 3 miles away from him that Walnut suddenly raised his hand and shouted, "Fellow Taoist, please wait." End of chapter. Chapter 1895. Lu Yi had experienced countless battles, both big and small, so he naturally wouldn't let his opponent's words affect his rhythm. Who knew if this was a trick of the enemy? So even if he heard Walnut's voice, his attack didn't change in the slightest. Seeing this, Walnut was a little anxious and quickly said, "Fellow Taoist, I will leave this battle on my own. I just want to be friends with you." Although she knew her life wasn't in danger here, seeing the cultivator in front of her rushing over with an imposing aura, Walnut was still terrified. She finally understood why Che-Chi lost so quickly. She had never experienced this kind of terrifying pressure before. Almost at the same time her voice fell, she felt a slight chill on her neck. By the time she reacted, her opponent was already standing beside her with a long saber against her neck. Lu Yi didn't slash down because his opponent didn't seem to have any intention of resisting. Lu Yi frowned and said, "Do you know me?" He had just arrived, and he only knew Gue Yi in this Azura field, but she suddenly wanted to be friends with him. Lu Yi couldn't help but wonder if this Walnut also came from the 10,000 Elephant Sea, and had seen him before. Walnut was stunned for a moment and quickly shook his head. "I've never seen you before." "Then why do you want to be friends with me?" Lu Yi asked. "Can we talk about it later?" "This isn't the place to talk." Walnut cautiously asked. "If fellow Taoist is willing, can we exchange imprints?" Lu Yi thought for a moment, and was indeed curious. Exchanging imprints wasn't a big deal, so he immediately put away his saber, and took out his Azura token. Seeing this, Walnut heaved a sigh of relief, and took out his Azura token. Immediately, under the dumbfounded gazes of countless cultivators in the stands, the two of them exchanged imprints, and Walnut's figure disappeared. She took the initiative to admit defeat and leave, so Lu Yi naturally won this battle. His ranking in the battle arena rose by almost 100 places. Many spectators had bet on Walnut in this battle, but in the end, it ended in such a way, causing a group of people to curse and shout that there was a conspiracy. However, they could only curse a little. Outsiders couldn't interfere with any choice a cultivator made in the battle arena. Walnut voluntarily admitted defeat and left, causing them to lose the bet. They could only say that they were unlucky. Back in the cave, Lu Yi had just appeared when the Azura token reacted. After checking as expected, it was a message from Walnut. "Fellow Taoist, don't be in a hurry to participate in the battle arena. I have something to discuss with you." Lu Yi replied, "What is it?" At the same time in Walnut's cave, she hurried to her master's side and said excitedly, "Master, that weapon cultivator just challenged me." The woman, who had been lying on the bed with her arms and legs spread out, suddenly became spirited when she heard this. She jumped up from the jade bed and grabbed her disciple's shoulders with both hands. Her eyes lit up. Good disciple. Did you kill him to help your master vent her anger? Walnut didn't know whether to laugh or cry. No, I admit defeat and quit. The woman thought about it and agreed. She was well aware of her disciple's strength. That bastard soldier cultivator had killed Che-Chi like he was killing a chicken. How could her disciple be a match for him? His interest waned. Then what's the point of saying all this? Walnut raised his Shura command. I exchanged imprints with him. The woman's eyes immediately lit up. Really? Walnut said. Of course I won't lie to you. I'm chatting with him right now. The woman immediately urged. Hurry, hurry. Let him tell you which battle arena he'll enter for the next battle. Master wants to place a bet. This weapon cultivator's strength isn't bad. He'll definitely have a place in the top 500. She had made a mistake earlier and bet on Che-Chi, resulting in a crushing defeat. However, she had seen Lu Ye's strength and was certain that the current ranking didn't reflect Lu Ye's ability. Therefore, he would definitely be able to advance triumphantly in the next battle arena. If she could enter the next battle arena with him and bet on him, even if she didn't make a lot of money, she would definitely be able to make up for her recent losses. It was because of this that Walnut wanted to exchange the Shura command imprints with Lu Yi. She felt that her master was too pitiful. She lost 9 out of 10 gambles, and often lost all her Shura seals in one go. But master, you just lost all your Shura seals. What are you going to bet with? Walnut asked. The woman proudly said. Who told you that master just bet on Shura seals? Walnut was puzzled. Then master you. I just bet on spirit jades. I lost all my spirit jades, but my Shura seals are still there. The woman smiled. It was really like 1,000 pear trees blooming, but her expression was still a little smug. I'll talk to him, Walnut said and quickly sent another message. On the other side, after Walnut's explanation, Lu Yi finally understood what she wanted to do. He couldn't help but admit that this woman was quite intelligent. She had only seen one of his battle arenas and realized that this was a way to make money. Perhaps many people had already realized it. It was just that Walnut's luck was very good. He just happened to be challenged by arenas and then managed to contact him. Other cultivators who had realized this had no way of contacting him even if they wanted to. Lu Yi couldn't help but have some misgivings. Wouldn't doing this violate some rule of the Azura arena? Walnut said, Of course not. This kind of thing is actually very common. Moreover, winning or losing after a bet isn't based on how much you bet. Instead, it's the winning side splitting the losing side's bet. Strictly speaking, this is just a bet between spectators. It doesn't cause the Azura arena to lose anything. Lu Yi understood and asked, Then how can I guarantee that you can enter my battle arena to bet? Walnut said, Every battle arena has a serial number. After you enter, just look up, and you'll be able to see it. When the time comes, send me a message, and I can follow the serial number to enter. Lu Yi really hadn't noticed this point. He had fought so many battle arenas and each time, he had only been observing his opponent. He had never really looked up. One last question. What benefits do I get? If he let Walnut bet on him, Lu Yi could guarantee that Walnut would win. However, this was only the benefit that Walnut could obtain. He had worked so hard to participate in the battle arena, and all the benefits were taken by others. Of course he wouldn't be happy. Walnut had obviously expected this and answered without hesitation. Split it 30-70. All my winnings will be split 30-70 with you. The Azura seal can't be traded. How can you split it with me? Lu Yi asked. Although the Azura seal can't be traded, I can go to the Azura treasury and exchange it for resources for you. Lu Yi understood. This was indeed a good idea. Then he asked again, Me 70? Me 70. In the cave abode, Lu Yi blinked and replied, At least 50-50. Otherwise, forget it. He thought that Walnut would haggle, but he didn't expect that he would quickly agree. Okay, 50-50 it is. This made Lu Yi a little uncertain. How can I guarantee that you'll be willing to split your winnings with me after you win? If Walnut acted shamelessly, he could only stare at him helplessly. If fellow Taoist has time, can you come to the Treasury Plaza and sign an Azura contract? With a contract, no one can go back on their word. Lu Yi didn't agree. Or, It could be said that he had originally planned to sign an Azura contract with Walnut. The binding power of this Azura battlefield was equivalent to the heavenly fate contract of the early 9 provinces. After a short while in the Treasury Plaza, Lu Yi saw Walnut again. She had already drawn up the Azura contract. Lu Yi picked it up and examined it. After confirming that there were no problems, and that all the terms were as they had discussed, he straightforwardly left his mark on it. Walnut did the same. Under the 2 marks, the Azura contract disappeared into thin air. At the same time, Lu Yi clearly felt an inexplicable power pouring into his body. But in the next instant, the talent tree in his body moved. He was startled and hurriedly looked inside his body. Under the observation of his mind, he saw that the talent tree was burning fiercely. However, at this moment, there was a strange object that looked like a golden chain outside the talent tree, like a long snake entrenched on the talent tree. As the fire burned, the snake-like chain vibrated incessantly. A large amount of gray fog rose up. This scene surprised Lu Yi, because something like this had never happened before. He thought for a moment, and realized that the snake-like chain should be the mysterious power of the Azura contract. Strictly speaking, the Azura contract was an extension of the power of the Azura battlefield. Even if it was insignificant, it was still the power of a supreme treasure. At this moment, the talent tree was burning it, as if it was dealing with an external force that had invaded its body. The talent tree could actually resist the power of a supreme treasure? Although the burning process was very slow, it could be seen from the rising gray fog that the chain was indeed burning. If this continued, the chain would be burned away sooner or later. And once the chain was burned away, the Azura contract would no longer bind him. This was undoubtedly an unexpected discovery, and Lu Yi could not help but wonder if the talent tree was also a starry sky supreme treasure. He had thought about this before, but because the starry sky supreme treasures he had come into contact with all had mysterious powers, their performance was not the same as the talent tree. So he ruled out this judgment. The talent tree's performance was more like an inheritance. However, this accident caused him to have such thoughts again, because as far as he knew, the power of supreme treasures could only be resisted by supreme treasures. Perhaps the talent tree was really a starry sky supreme treasure, but this supreme treasure was somewhat different from what he knew. Perhaps it was a supreme treasure that could continuously transform with the growth of a cultivator's cultivation. The talent tree could not stop the chain from burning away, and even if it could, he was not willing to do so, because he wanted to know if the talent tree could burn away the chain. If it could, then in this Azura battlefield, any form of Azura contract would not bind him. The one he had signed with Walnut was not harmful to him, but it was hard to guarantee that he would not encounter any harm in the future. If the talent tree had such an ability, it would undoubtedly give him another trump card. Chapter 1896. Speaking of which, when Lu Yi was in the 9 states, he had also signed a heavenly secret contract with others. Although it wasn't many times, such a thing had never happened before. After thinking for a moment, he roughly understood. The manifestation of a heavenly secret contract was different from the Azura contract. After a heavenly secret contract was signed, Little Nine would secretly monitor both parties. If someone violated the contract, Little Nine would punish them. But the strength of the Azura contract directly entered a cultivator's body. This naturally triggered a reaction from the talent tree. Fellow Taoist? Seeing Lu Yi in a daze, Walnut couldn't help but call out. She comforted him. Fellow Taoist need not worry. When fellow Taoist leaves the Azura arena in the future, the strength of the Azura contract will naturally dissipate. Lu Yi nodded. He naturally wasn't worried. Now he was curious as to how long the strength of the Azura contract could last in his body. When does fellow Taoist plan to continue participating in the battle arena? Walnut asked. Now, Lu Yi replied. Walnut happily said, then I will wait for fellow Taoist's good news. The two returned to their respective caves, and Lu Yi immediately began his challenge. He entered the battle arena and looked up. Sure enough, he saw a number in the sealed space of the battle arena. He took out the Azura command and sent a message to Walnut. After Walnut responded, he put away the Azura command. A moment later, he turned his head and saw Walnut's figure in that direction. When their eyes met, Walnut waved at him. But what surprised Lu Yi was that there was actually a very dignified woman sitting next to Walnut. Lu Yi blinked and laughed. He was wondering why Walnut had so readily agreed to a 50-50 split. It turned out that she wasn't the only one betting on him. The 50-50 split was only between him and Walnut. It didn't include that woman. 30 breaths of time quickly passed. The battle began, and then quickly ended. When his figure dissipated, Lu Yi saw the woman beside Walnut stand up, looking very happy. For the next several days, Lu Yi continued to travel back and forth in the battle arena. Every time he challenged, his ranking would rise by nearly 100 places. His contact with Walnut also gradually increased. Every victory brought benefits to the master and disciple pair. At the very beginning, because the master and disciple pair didn't have much capital, they didn't win much. But as the master and disciple pair slowly accumulated their capital, the benefits they obtained gradually increased. This was because every time they bet all their Azura seals on Lu Yi, no one else had the same boldness as them. As a result, the proportion of their bets far exceeded that of the other cultivators. And if Lu Yi won, they would receive even greater benefits. Just like a rolling snowball, in just a few days, the number of Azura seals the master and disciple had accumulated increased by more than 10 times. During this time, Lu Yi had thought about finding more people to sign the Azura contract in this way. But after thinking about it for a while, he decided against it. The main thing was that he didn't know anyone here, so they didn't trust him. During this time, he had sent a message to Gue Yi, wanting her to reap some benefits. Unfortunately, Gue Yi had always been against betting on luck. Not only did she not come to place a bet, she even persuaded young Master Lu to get involved in these matters. A few days later, Lu Yi's ranking in the battle arena had already entered the top 500. In the battle record column, a record of 152 wins and 0 losses was extremely eye-catching, and it repeatedly caused great psychological pressure to his opponents. This was because any cultivator with the slightest bit of common sense would know what such a terrifying record entailed. After another battle, Lu Yi returned to his cave abode to rest and reorganize. It had to be said that as his ranking rose, the opponents he encountered did indeed become stronger. In particular, the cultivators in the top 1,000 were not to be underestimated. Lu Yi had also changed his original intention. His initial goal in participating in the battle arena was to reach the top of the rankings and fight for the Azura Seal reward. However, after so many battles, his goal was no longer just that. This was because he discovered that this was a rare place to broaden his horizons. Although he had fought against Yu Yao in the 10,000 Elephant Sea, he hadn't had many opportunities to do so. However, it was different here. Every opponent he encountered was at the late stage of Yu Yao, without exception. Moreover, they were all from different backgrounds, inheritances, and races. Fighting against different opponents often gave him many wonderful insights, and at the same time, he could also test his various shortcomings. He very much enjoyed this kind of competition, where every opponent spared no effort to kill him. In Walnut's cave abode, Walnut looked at the woman and asked, "Master, he has already entered the top 500. Can he continue to advance?" The reason she asked this question was naturally because the woman's initial judgment was that Lu Yi had a place in the top 500. In just a few short days, this judgment had become true. Therefore, before entering the top 500, Walnut had full confidence in Lu Yi. Before every battle began, she would bet on Lu Yi without hesitation, but now she couldn't be sure. The woman revealed a thoughtful expression and said, "That kid probably hasn't used his full strength." In the end, her eyesight was not as good as Walnut's. Although Lu Yi had to fight for a long time to win in the recent battles, and there were a few times when it looked like he had won by a narrow margin, the woman always felt that Lu Yi's strength was not limited to this. Those fierce battles and narrow victories were more like a kind of deliberate suppression to temper himself. Walnut was shocked. He's already in the top 500, and he hasn't used his full strength. This ranking was something she would never be able to achieve in her entire life. Her best result had been when she had entered the top 5,000, and the gap between her and the top 500 was like a chasm. Did he send you a message? The woman asked again. Walnut shook her head. Then there's no mistake. The woman nodded. He definitely has a place in the top 100. Walnut hesitated. Then the next battle. No change, we'll bet everything on him. The woman said resolutely. Walnut was secretly speechless. The two of them, master and disciple, had never experienced such wealth before. In just a few days, they had accumulated an extremely large amount of wealth. However, if they were to make a mistake in the future, then all their previous savings would be for naught. Walnut didn't dare believe her master's judgment, because her master's gambling luck really wasn't very good. Just to be safe, she couldn't help but send a message to Lu Yi. Can you still win? No problem. Lu Yi quickly replied, and at the same time, he sent a serial number to the battlefield. Walnut was shocked. Aren't you going to rest? She had never seen such a person before. He had clearly consumed a lot of energy in the last battle, and it had only been a short while, yet he had actually started again. She hurriedly sent the serial number to her master, and they entered the battlefield together. When she looked up, Lu Yi was already standing in the middle of the battlefield, and he didn't look the least bit dispirited. On the contrary, he looked full of energy. If it were any other cultivator, they might indeed need a period of time to recover after a hardy battle. But Lu Yi had the innate skill tree, and the magic power he consumed could be quickly replenished. As long as his physical strength could keep up, he wouldn't need to recover for too long. It was another fierce battle. For a battle of this level, there were many cultivators in the stands. It was not like when Lu Yi had just entered the top 10,000. At that time, there were few cultivators in the stands, but now, there were almost no empty seats. With so many spectators, there were naturally more cultivators betting. As a result, Walnut and her master could obtain even greater benefits. The only thing that dissatisfied the woman was that now, it wasn't just her and her master who were staring at Lu Yi. Many people had already noticed this newcomer. Although these people couldn't contact Lu Yi and couldn't chase him into a specific Azura field, there were always some people who were lucky enough to enter the place where Lu Yi was. Naturally, they would bet on him without hesitation. As a result, the benefits of Walnut and her master were reduced in disguise. Victory after victory, Walnut felt that she had won too many times. She never thought that it would be so easy to obtain Azura seals in this Azura field. She more or less understood the joy of her master. After a few more victories, Lu Yi's ranking had already entered the top 100. The news of the newcomer's rise spread, and many people in the Azura field knew that an incredible newcomer had arrived. So far, he hadn't tasted a single defeat in 100 or 200 battles. Unfortunately, for the time being, no one knew where this newcomer came from or what his name was. This was because this newcomer had hidden his information on the battlefield rankings. Now they only knew that he was a saber-wielding cultivator of the human race. After entering the top 100, the rules changed again. He could no longer challenge opponents in the top 100. Right now, Lu Yi could only challenge cultivators ranked in the top 10. In other words, he needed to win at least 9 more battles to enter the top 10. However, considering that some cultivators weren't in the heavenly Azura field right now, the number of battles wouldn't just be 9, but more. For Lu Yi, this wasn't a problem. The strength of the top 100 cultivators, compared to the strength of the top 500 cultivators, obviously had some changes. Even Lu Yi had to be careful because some cultivators often used some strange methods. However, if he was careless, he could capsize the boat in the gutter. Walnut was completely dumbfounded, because she never thought that Lu Yi would still be able to advance in the top 100. One had to know that at first, her master had judged that Lu Yi had a place in the top 500. Later, she judged it to be the top 100. However, this still wasn't the limit. After more than 10 battles, Lu Yi successfully entered the top 10. The cultivators in the Azura field all knew that in this battlefield, the top 10 cultivators, and those below them were 2 different levels of existence. They didn't dare to say that entering the top 10 meant that they would definitely be promoted to sunshine. but the strength of the top 10 cultivators would always be at the top of the entire realm. Walnut watched every battle from beginning to end, and was also on tenterhooks the whole time. After all, Luya's victory or defeat was related to her entire fortune. Gradually she discovered a strange thing. Whether it was the top 500 or the top 100, or the top 10, Luya's performance had never changed. In every battle, it looked like he had used all his strength to win with difficulty. If it was just 1 or 2 battles, it wouldn't be a big deal. However, it was the same every time. It made people suspect one thing. Even in the top 10 battles, Luya still didn't really use all his strength. It was because he still had some strength left, that he could control the changes in the battle situation. End of chapter. Chapter 1897. Inside the cave, Luya held the Azura token in his hand, and checked his ranking in the battle arena. 7th place, Luya 9 Heaven's Realm, 232 wins, 0 losses. The rules stated that the top 10 could only be challenged according to their ranking. In other words, Luya could only challenge one opponent at the moment, and that was the opponent ranked 6th. Unless this opponent wasn't in the Heavenly Azura region, then Luya could skip him and challenge the 5th place. After a short rest and recuperation, Luya continued to challenge. However, he didn't succeed this time, which undoubtedly meant that the opponent ranked 6th wasn't in the Heavenly Azura region. Luya had encountered this situation many times, so he naturally wasn't unfamiliar with it. He felt a little regretful because in this way, he would lose an opportunity to fight against the top Yuyao. He chose a new target and challenged the 5th place. He still didn't succeed, but Luya didn't care and continued to challenge the 4th place, 3rd place, 2nd place, 1st place. After a short while, Luya frowned and fell into deep thought. It seemed that the few people ranked ahead of him were quite busy and weren't in the Heavenly Azura region now. They were probably participating in the training. This inevitably made him feel a little unsatisfied, and his plan to reach the top of the battle arena in one go fell through. However, this wasn't a big problem. According to Chen Xuanhai's guidance, Luya knew that 3 days before the conclusion of the battle arena, basically all the cultivators who wanted to maintain their rankings would return to the Heavenly Azura region. Especially those who were ranked at the top. They absolutely wouldn't miss this time, because if they didn't return in time and were challenged, then they would be judged to have lost. Unlike now, when Luya failed to challenge them, their rankings wouldn't change. Since he couldn't challenge anyone for the time being, Luya could only give up. He checked the time of the next battle arena, and found that it would be around a month or so. After thinking for a moment, he sent a message to Walnut to inform her of this situation. Walnut quickly replied, "Then fellow Taoist, please come to the Treasury Plaza. I'll exchange the Azura tokens I gave you for the resources you need." "There's no need. Keep them for now, and wait until the battle arena concludes." On the other side, Walnut couldn't help but be stunned for a moment, but she didn't receive a reply when she sent a message back. On a jade bed nearby, a woman was sprawled out on her back and hugged her Azura token with both hands, as if she was holding the most precious treasure in the world. Suddenly he stood up and looked at Walnut. "Which battlefield should we enter?" Walnut looked at his master in a daze. "The top 6 are not in the Heaven Azura region. He can't challenge them right now." The woman couldn't help showing a look of disappointment when she heard this. "That's a pity. This little brat has now won 200 battles, and his momentum is at its peak. Even if he continues to challenge, he still has a high chance of winning." She sighed and said, "If he can't challenge him, there's nothing we can do. We'll just have to split the spoils with him." Walnut said, "He said that he doesn't need it for now. He wants to wait until after the conclusion of this battle." The woman blinked and immediately came to a realization. Interesting. This kid clearly wants to continue the challenge 3 days before settlement. Is he that confident in himself? If he hadn't decided to continue the challenge, why would he wait until after the settlement to split the loot? To be honest, she had also watched a lot of Luya's fights, but until now, she still couldn't figure out the depth of Luya's strength. After all, the battle arena was isolated from the outside world. It was inconvenient for her to watch from the stands, and she couldn't perceive the fight too clearly. So even if she was a sunshine, sometimes she would make mistakes. "Honorable Master, what should we do?" Walnut asked. The woman thought for a moment, and her gambling spirit was ignited. Full of anticipation, she said, "If he wants to continue the challenge, then we'll continue to bet on him." Walnut couldn't help but feel apprehensive. "But Honorable Master, the challenges will definitely become more and more difficult. If he loses one of them, after winning for so long, if he lost one of them, then everything they had won would become fleeting clouds." The woman blinked at her, excitement in the depths of her eyes. "This is where the joy of gambling lies, my good disciple. All the unknown risks are the most worth pursuing in this world." AI. Walnut sighed deeply. She felt that her honorable master really couldn't be saved. As long as it involved gambling, she would often become infatuated with it. The woman's eyes were unhurried. She was incomparably looking forward to the arrival of the 3 days before settlement. In Lu Ye's Immortal's cave, he ended his transmission with Walnut and directly walked out. There was still almost a month to the settlement date. Of course, he couldn't wait here forever. He couldn't fight in the battle arena, but there was no problem in participating in the Azura arena. This was one of the reasons he came to the Azura arena. Only by earning enough Azura seals would he be able to go to the treasury to exchange for the resources he needed. After leaving his cave, Lu Yi leaped up and flew towards the sky. Looking around, he could clearly see that there were many cultivators nearby that were flying up as well. Just like the scene he'd seen when he'd just entered the heavenly Azura realm with Gue Yi. These cultivators were clearly going to participate in the tempering as well. All of a sudden, Lu Ye's body began to rise, until he suddenly felt as if his entire body had collided with a soft and invisible membrane. His field of vision suddenly turned dark, and even his powerful perception disappeared without a trace at this moment. He did not panic in the slightest. Although this was his first time participating in the experiential training, he had done enough research on this aspect. Naturally, he knew that this was a process that every cultivator had to go through. His current state was very strange. He knew that he still existed, but he just couldn't feel it. It was as if his entire being had turned into an independent thought. In the vast darkness, an ancient and desolate voice sounded in his ears. The Black Cloud continent had a deep heritage, a vast territory and rich resources. The cultivation world produced many capable people, and the world was prosperous. Until one day, a cultivator brought back a treasure from the starry sky. A light suddenly lit up in the darkness, and then an object appeared in front of Lu Ye's eyes. It was a round ball the size of a human head. It was dark green in color, and he couldn't make out much about it. However, Lu Yi knew that this should be the treasure mentioned by the desolate voice. The light dissipated, and his vision once again fell into darkness. The news leaked out, attracting countless powerhouses to fight over it. A great battle broke out, and the remaining cultivators escorted the successor of the Black Cloud sect into the starry sky, wanting to escape to a nearby star system to seek refuge. Another light lit up, and Lu Yi saw a broken fleet sailing through the starry sky. The light flickered, illuminating the broken battleship, as if it could be destroyed at any time. Lu Yi raised his eyebrows, thinking that this experience should have something to do with escorting the so-called successor of the Black Cloud sect. So, as long as he could hold on until the news of this broken fleet escaping to a nearby star system, he should have completed the test of the experience. This was not difficult. According to the information he knew, the difficulty of the experience for cultivators entering the Azura field for the first time would not be too high. Basically, it was within the scope of the cultivator's ability to deal with it. This could be considered a benefit given to cultivators by the Azura field, allowing them to personally understand the process of the experience. However, apart from the first experience, there was no such good thing. Basically, every time a cultivator went on an experience, there would be a risk of losing their life, because only in this way could the experience be effective. The reason why the Heavenly Azura clansmen were so strong in the past was because they had been honed in the Azura field. The strong waves washed away the sand, and the clansmen who were not strong enough had been eliminated in the training. Those who survived were all elites, and this laid the foundation for them to unify hundreds of galaxies. As his thoughts changed, the ancient and desolate voice sounded again. You, the leader of the 9 Heavens Star Pirate Gang, have led your own Star Pirate Gang and joined forces with other Star Pirate Gangs. On the way, you are determined to seize that treasure and kill the cultivators of the Black Cloud sect. Luyi could not help but be shocked. Just from what the voice said, he thought that his experience this time was to protect the successor of the Black Cloud sect, and that ball-like treasure, and then escort them to a neighboring star system. After all, ever since he started cultivating, he had always been kind to others, and it was his duty to protect the weak. But he never expected that in this experience, he would be the one doing evil. Luyi couldn't help but frown. Doing evil was finally going against his ideals, but this was the tempering of the Azura realm. No one knew what sort of status the Azura realm would arrange for them before they entered, or what sort of tempering they would be given. Moreover, the Heavenly Azura clan was not a kind race. Otherwise they would not have enslaved so many star systems. These experiences were originally prepared for the Heavenly Azura clan, so there was no difference to them, whether they were good or evil. Luyi sighed helplessly. Now that things had come to this, he had no other choice but to accept his fate. It would not be too late to act according to the circumstances. The calculation of the Azura field experience was not rigid, but very flexible. As long as one performed well enough in the experience, even if they did not act according to the arrangements of the Azura field, they would still be able to obtain the corresponding Azura seal reward. It could be said that every experience was equivalent to a real world, and cultivators could make any choice according to their own ideas. Another light lit up, and this time, what appeared in Lu Ye's field of vision was a small fleet. More than a dozen tiger shark battleships gathered around a medium-sized battleship, and on the surface of the battleship, there were 2 large words inscribed, which were the words 9 Heavens. There was no doubt that this was his own Star Pirate Gang, and now it was chasing the Black Cloud fleet. However, in terms of size, his 9 Heavens Star Pirate Gang was greatly inferior to the Black Cloud fleet. His field of vision suddenly extended forward, and then broke through the isolation of the battleship. Luyi was surprised to find a familiar figure sitting on a chair inside the battleship, holding a long saber horizontally at his side, looking forward with a dignified expression. Who else could it be but himself? His field of vision suddenly merged with the figure sitting on the chair, and Luyi could feel the existence of his body again, and could not help but blink. He found that he was already inside the battleship, and just like what he saw just now, he was sitting here. End of chapter. Chapter 1898. At this moment, there were many cultivators bustling about in the warship. A faint fragrance lingered at the tip of one's nose, making one feel relaxed and happy. Luyi could not help but look down and see a young girl crouching in front of him. She was holding her 2 small hands and gently massaging his thighs with a gentle expression. He was startled. Just now, when he used that strange vision to observe the interior of the warship, he did not see this girl. Not only that, there was also a girl behind him who was currently massaging his shoulders. Another person hurriedly ran in front of him, cupped his fists, and said something loudly. Luyi did not hear clearly for a moment, because at this moment, some inexplicable information appeared in his mind. This information was related to all kinds of information regarding this experiential training. Before entering the experiential training, that ancient and desolate voice had only told him the general background of this experiential training. Now the additional information in his mind was some more detailed information. He calmed his mind and raised his head to look at the cultivator in front of him. He was not a human, and was surrounded by demonic qi. He should be from the demon race. The moment he saw the other party, Luyi recognized him. This was the second in command of his pirate gang, Yu Yao, who was second only to him in strength. Her name was Yi Hua. As for whether the other party was a shadow or a cultivator, who came here to participate in the experiential training like him, Luyi had no way of determining. This was because in the Azura field, All shadows were extremely real, and could only be accurately identified at the moment of death. What is it? Lu Yi asked in a deep voice. Since he had been arranged to be the leader of the pirate gang, he naturally had to act like a leader. This was something that Chen Xianhai had seriously warned him about. In the Azura Field experiential training, the more perfectly he integrated into his assigned identity, the more Azura seals he would be able to obtain in the end. There had been people who had deliberately displayed actions that did not match their identities, but in the end, they did not have a good ending. Take the current situation for example. If Lu Yi did not display the temperament that a leader of a pirate gang should have, and instead did some actions that did not match his identity, the pirates under him would definitely become suspicious. Yi Hua spoke again. Chief, Thunderlight has sent a message, asking us to speed up and bite the Black Cloud Fleet. Hearing the two words Thunderlight, Lu Ye's mind flashed with some information he had just received. The attack on the Black Cloud continent was a joint operation of many pirate gangs. The Nine Heavens pirate gang was just one of them. After all, the power of a domain, even if there was no Rizhao, was not something that a single pirate gang could swallow. The two of them were mother and daughter. One was called Qin Ru, and the other was called Qin Qin. The daughter followed her mother's surname, and they were plundered by the Nine Heavens Star Pirate Gang from a certain realm. Both mother and daughter were only star constellation realm cultivators. The Azura Field was really a beast. Why did they arrange such an evil identity for him? Or should it be said that a star pirate should be like this? Although Lu Yi had traveled extensively for many years, he really hadn't met many star pirates. He had only met the Divine Wind Star Pirate Gang before he promoted Yu Yao. So he really didn't know what a star pirate should be like. No need. Of course, Lu Yi couldn't let the mother and daughter really bathe him. Although they were only shadows, he could still experience the most realistic experience. The moment he said this, Qin Ru looked up at Lu Yi in shock, her face full of fear and unease. Sir, did I do something wrong? That fear was not feigned. It came from the depths of her heart. Lu Yi could clearly see that her eyes were trembling. Qin Qin shuddered and directly knelt on the ground. Her delicate body trembled slightly, and her face was pale. Lu Yi frowned and waved his hand. No, you're dismissed. I have some things to think about. Qin Ru hurriedly retreated. She lowered her head and said, Then I'll take my leave. She couldn't help but exhort. Sir, it's more important to quickly heal your injuries. There will definitely be a battle soon. She pulled Qin Qin, and the mother and daughter hurriedly left. Looking at their departing figures, Lu Ye's eyes flashed. He turned his head and looked at the pool filled with medicinal liquid. Lu Yi walked up to the pool and reached his hand into the water. A moment later, he took off his clothes and jumped into the pool. He soaked his body in the water, leaving only his head above the water. Speaking of which, he hadn't enjoyed himself so much in all these years. It was rare that he had some free time today, so it wasn't too late to enjoy himself for a while. Half a day later, when Lu Yi walked out of the pool, refreshed, Qin Ru was standing guard outside. When she saw him, she hurriedly bowed. Sir, everything is ready. Lu Yi had no idea what she had prepared. He checked the information he had obtained from the Azura Field, but there was no record of this. He thought for a moment and said, Lead the way. Yes. Qin Ru responded and took the lead to leave. After a short while they came to a cabin. Lu Yi followed her in. Qin Ru closed the door, but Lu Yi was stunned. It was because in the room, Qin Qin was tied up and hung in the air. Her body was cool, and her face was full of fear and uneasiness. Qin Ru bit her lips. She turned around and picked up a long thorny whip from the side, and respectfully offered it with both hands. Lu Yi thought the mother and daughter were up to no good. He never expected to see such a scene. Looking at the long whip in Qin Ru's hand, he couldn't help but frown. Sir, Qin Ru called softly. She felt that the chief was a little different today. It was as if he didn't have the usual fierceness. Instead, he was more kind. Lu Yi raised his hand and grabbed the long whip to examine it carefully. Although it was cleaned, he could still smell a faint smell of blood from the long whip. He casually put away the long whip and ordered, Put her down. Then he turned and left. Qin Ru and her daughter were left looking at each other. In the center of the warship, Lu Yi returned. Lei Guang repeatedly sent messages to the Nine Heavens pirate gang to cooperate, but they turned a deaf ear. Although Nine Heavens didn't cooperate, the other pirate gangs were perfectly carrying out Lei Guang's orders. After sailing for a while, Lu Yi clearly felt a fight coming from the side. Looking sideways, through the crystal wall of the warship, he could clearly see that in the starry sky, there were warships fighting fiercely. Obviously, the Black Cloud Fleet had sent a part of its forces to intercept the pirate gangs. Second head Yihua walked over excitedly. "Chief, the opportunity has come." Lu Yi asked, "What opportunity?" Yihua pointed at the battlefield and said, "The battle over there is very intense. If we enter at this time, we will definitely be able to obtain the greatest benefits with the least cost." Lu Yi, however, showed a lack of interest. "Ignore it, continue the pursuit." Yihua was stunned for a moment. "But Chief, we can't miss such a good opportunity." Lu Yi glanced at him. "Am I the chief, or are you the chief?" Yihua was stunned. Then he said in panic, "Of course you are the chief." "Then do as I say." "Yes." Yihua lowered his head and left. The pirate fleet continued to move forward, quickly passing by the battlefield. Along the way, they encountered such battles from time to time. Under the pursuit of the various pirate gangs, the Black Cloud Fleet could only cut off their wrists time and time again, dividing their forces to stop them. Half a month passed in the blink of an eye, and the huge Black Cloud Fleet had been severely weakened. It was only at this time that Lei Guang suddenly used their trump card. More than a dozen pirate gangs that had never appeared before suddenly charged out from the front and blocked the Black Cloud Fleet's path, completely cutting off the Black Cloud Fleet's hope of escape. End of chapter. Chapter 1899. Besieged from the front and back, the Black Cloud Fleet had nowhere to run. Furthermore, they had been severely weakened during their escape. The various pirate gangs immediately swarmed forward like fish that had smelled blood. A great battle broke out. By the time the Nine Heavens Star pirate gang arrived, the vast battlefield had already turned into a mess. Although the pirate gangs had different origins, with Thunder Light's coordination, there was not much of a problem. Coupled with the fact that the overall strength of the Nine Heavens Star pirate gang was stronger than the Black Cloud Fleet, the moment the battle began, the Black Cloud Fleet fell into a disadvantageous position. The outer battleships were destroyed one after another, and the cultivators hiding in the battleships also did not have a good end. The scene was cruel and bloody. "Boss, give the order." Yihua walked in front of Lu Yi, his face full of fighting spirit. A group of pirate gang cultivators followed closely behind him, all of them rubbing their fists. Lu Yi withdrew his gaze from the battlefield and glanced at him leisurely. "Wait a moment." Yihua stared blankly for a moment before hastily advising, "But Chief, Thunder Light has repeatedly sent messages to us, but we have ignored them all. Now that Thunder Light is monitoring the battle from the side, if we don't contribute, Thunder Light will definitely not agree." "So what if they don't agree?" Yihua was anxious. Thunder Light has always been unscrupulous in their actions, and now they are very dissatisfied with us. If we disobey them again, I'm afraid they will eliminate us first. Do they have the guts? Lu Yi narrowed his eyes slightly. Yihua clenched his teeth and said, "Chief, open your eyes wide and look clearly. Thunderlight Guild has already set up an offensive formation against our group. If you continue to persist in going about things the wrong way, I'm afraid that before Black Cloud is annihilated, our group will be the first to suffer." "How dare you?" A shout came, but it did not come from Lu Yi, but from the third head of the Nine Heavens Star pirate gang, a Yu Yao called Zi Xiao. Second head, "How can you speak to the boss like that? The boss naturally has his own considerations." There were only 3 Yu Yao in the entire Nine Heavens Star pirate gang. Lu Yi was the strongest, Yihua was the middle Yu Yao, and this Zi Xiao was the early Yu Yao. As Zi Xiao's voice fell, Yihua suddenly sneered. "Considerations? I don't know what kind of considerations the head has, but I do know that the head has been overcautious in his actions recently, and has completely lost the courage and decisiveness of the past. Especially the operation against He Yun this time. Who knows how many good opportunities have been missed? He turned to look at Lu Yi. As expected, you are no longer suitable to be the leader. The 9 heavens need to find a new path. As soon as these words were spoken, the expressions of all the cultivators on the warship changed. Zizhao's face even sank. Second head, what nonsense are you talking about? Do you want to have internal strife in the midst of a great war? Yihua gave a disdainful laugh. Internal strife? You underestimate me too much. As soon as he finished speaking, his spiritual power surged, and his blood and qi swirled around him. He took a step forward and threw a punch at Lu Yi, who was sitting on the chair. Zizhao's expression changed drastically as he exclaimed, "Late stage Yu Yao?" He didn't know when Yihua had advanced to the late stage, but he didn't know about it at all. He had always thought that Yihua was only at the middle stage. Judging from Yihua's painstaking efforts to conceal his cultivation from his fellow pirates, this guy didn't have any good intentions. Just as he was about to remind Lu Yi to be careful, he saw a scene from the corner of his eye that made his eyes pop out of their sockets. Qin Ru, who had been standing behind Lu Yi and serving him attentively, had a sword in her hand at some unknown time, and was stabbing towards Lu Ye's neck. Not only that, Qin, who was kneeling in front of Lu Yi, suddenly exerted her strength and grabbed one of Lu Ye's legs with both hands, restricting his movements while biting down. Many unforeseen events occurred at the same time. Zizhao immediately realized that Yihua had clearly come prepared, and his preparations were extremely thorough. This guy had long planned to usurp the throne, and had even colluded with Qin Ru and her mother at some unknown time. Otherwise, Qin Ru and her mother wouldn't have reacted like this. Ever since they had been captured, they had always been very docile. The leader didn't obey Lei Guang's orders, and had only accelerated the process. Even if today didn't happen, this scene was bound to happen in the near future. In the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint, the sound of metal clashing could be heard. Accompanied by Qin Ru's cry of alarm, Yihua, who was rushing towards Lu Yi, suddenly froze in place. Ferocious waves of qi swept out in all directions, turning the center of the warship into a mess. In this small area, the violent surging of transcendence energy caused the blood and qi of many constellations to surge, causing them to lose their footing. In the end, Zizhao was Yu Yao, and was the first to recover from this unforeseen event. He immediately thought of rescuing Lu Yi, but just as he took a step forward, he was stunned. This was because, in his imagination, the scene of the leader being heavily injured by a sneak attack didn't happen. Facing Yihua's long-planned attack, the leader, who was sitting upright, only swung his fist and blocked the other party's bombardment. Qin Ru's sneak attack also didn't seem to have any effect. She was even sent flying by the surging transcendence energy just now. She was still holding her sword, but there wasn't the slightest trace of blood on it. Qin was still hugging Lu Ye's leg, but no matter how fierce she was, she couldn't bite through Lu Ye's protective transcendence energy. After all, the difference between their cultivation levels was too great. Yihua's pupils suddenly shrank, his face filled with disbelief. According to his plan, even if his punch couldn't kill Lu Yi, it would at least be able to heavily injure him. But in reality, that wasn't the case at all. The leader had only used a single fist to block his bombardment. This was something he found hard to understand. He knew that the leader's strength wasn't bad, but he didn't expect it to be to this extent. Moreover, the leader's entire body didn't show the slightest sign of his transcendence energy being unstable. This was what he found inconceivable. "Are you curious as to why I wasn't poisoned?" Lu Yi looked at Yihua and suddenly spoke. His transcendence energy was still circulating, forcing Yihua to not dare to retreat. Otherwise, the ferocious transcendence energy would immediately engulf him. While resisting with great difficulty, Yihua's expression was one of astonishment. "You already knew?" Lu Yi lifted the leg that Qin was hugging and casually swung it, sending Qin flying. The woman crashed into the side of the ship and fell down with a miserable cry. She hurriedly rushed to her mother's side and helped her up. The mother and daughter looked at Lu Yi, who was still sitting in the same place with fiery eyes, their beautiful eyes filled with accusation. Of course I knew there was poison in the pool. Lu Yi glanced at the mother and daughter. Half a month ago, when he first entered the pool, he had already noticed it. However, the poison was very hidden, and the toxicity didn't seem to be very strong. At that time, he was injured, so when he entered the pool, the poison would have seeped into his body. This wasn't strange. After all, Lu Ye's cultivation was at the late stage of Yuyao. If the poison wasn't hidden well enough, he would definitely have noticed it. In fact, he really didn't notice anything, but his talent tree had some reaction. At that time, he thought that Qin Ru and her daughter were holding a grudge. After all, as the leader of the Nine Heavens pirate gang, he had done many terrible things to them, so it was reasonable for them to hold a grudge against him. However, later on, he slowly realized that things weren't so simple. Qin Ru and her daughter alone didn't have the ability to do this. It wasn't until Yi Hua's sudden attack that the truth was revealed. The one who ordered Qin Ru and her daughter to poison him was undoubtedly Yi Hua. If there wasn't someone powerful enough standing behind them, how could the mother and daughter have the courage and ability to do so? Moreover, the fragrance of Qin Ru and her daughter today was different from before. When they stood beside Lu Yi, his talent tree had reacted again. Therefore, Lu Yi guessed that the poison in the pool needed another poison to activate, which was what Qin Ru and her daughter had smeared on their bodies today. As for what effect this poison would have, he had no way of guessing. However, since Yi Hua dared to make a move, he definitely had full confidence. In addition, he had concealed his cultivation. This sudden attack was very difficult for an ordinary late-stage Yuyao to escape. Lu Ye's heart trembled. To be honest, if it weren't for his talent tree, he would have definitely suffered a loss this time. This was his first trial in the Azura field. Didn't they say that the first trial wasn't very difficult? This was somewhat inconsistent with the information he had received from Chen Xianhai and Gui Yi. As this thought flashed through his mind, his transcendence energy suddenly surged. Yi Hua cried out in alarm and flew backwards. Losing in a direct clash of transcendence energy, like this caused his blood and qi to become turbulent, and his transcendence energy to become unstable. He hurriedly tried to adjust his transcendence energy as he flew backwards. But how could he still have the chance? With a clang, the mountain plate saber was unsheathed. Lu Yi followed like a shadow and slashed out with bared fang. Resplendent saber light filled the entire battleship, and the faint roar of a beast could be heard. By the time everyone regained their senses, Lu Yi had already sheathed his saber. Not far in front of him, Yi Hua, who had been so aggressive just a moment ago, was lying on the ground, a pool of blood flowing from his body. His eyes were wide open, and his vitality had dissipated. The group of pirates who had been following Yi Hua just now felt their bodies turn cold. They had listened to Yi Hua's nonsense and followed him, but it was only now that they realized that their chief's strength was actually terrifying to such an extent. Even though Yi Hua had only recently advanced to the late stage of the Moon Jade Realm, he was still a late-stage Moon Jade Realm cultivator. Yet he was still killed by their chief with a single saber strike. On the other side, Qin Ru and her daughter were extremely pale. They stared blankly at Lu Yi, as if they were looking at an insurmountable mountain. Their hearts were filled with despair. Lu Yi looked over, and the mother and daughter couldn't help but shiver. They realized that what awaited them would be a humiliation that was 1,000 times crueler than before. Gritting her teeth, Qin Ru raised her sword and charged at Lu Yi, yelling, "I'll kill you!" A buzzing sound suddenly rang out, and the battleship shook violently. Everyone lost their footing, and Qin Ru, who had charged over with her sword, also fell to the ground. An anxious voice rang out, "Chief, the Thunder Light is attacking us." Lu Yi turned his head and saw that the Thunder Light fleet, which had been in an offensive posture before, was no longer hiding their fangs and brazenly attacking the Nine Heavens pirate gang's battleship. During the chase, the Nine Heavens pirate gang had ignored the Thunder Light fleet's orders, which had long since infuriated them. Now that the situation was set, as long as they eliminated the Black Cloud fleet, it would be time to divide the spoils. One less pirate gang was nothing, and they could even divide more spoils. Naturally, the Thunder Light fleet would not show any mercy. End of chapter. Chapter 1900. Lei Guang's sudden attack had undoubtedly caught the Nine Heavens Star Pirate Gang off guard. The Star Pirates on this side did not expect the other party to be so ruthless. Outside the battleship, 2 Tiger Shark battleships had already been destroyed, and the cultivators on the battleships had also died. Now that the main warship of the pirate gang was under attack, and facing an opponent like Lei Guang, the Nine Heavens were completely powerless to resist. All the pirates were terrified. Zishao! Lu Yi shouted. Here! The third head, Zishao, immediately responded. Take over the fleet and try to break out. How many of the pirates around him could survive was also related to the rewards he could get in the end. Simply put, as the head of the Nine Heavens pirate gang, he had the responsibility to protect the lives of the pirates under his command. The more pirates there were in the Nine Heavens, the greater the benefits he could get after completing this training. Lu Yi naturally did not want the pirate gang under his command to suffer too many casualties. What about you, head? Zishao asked. Lu Yi looked in the direction of the main warship of the Lei Guang pirate gang, with an indifferent expression. Capture the ringleader. As he finished speaking, he rushed out of the warship and pounced straight at the main warship of the Lei Guang pirate gang. At this time, at the center of the main warship of the Lei Guang pirate gang, a cultivator with distinct edges and corners, as if he was carved out of stone, stood there casually with a fierce and ruthless expression on his face. It was the head of the Lei Guang pirate gang, Tianyan, uniting the major pirate gangs to launch a surprise attack on the Black Cloud continent was his idea. Since the beginning of the plan, everything had been going smoothly. Now it was finally time to reap the rewards. Head, the Nine Heavens want to break out. Suddenly a voice sounded. Tianyan snorted coldly. Break out. Kill them all. They don't listen to orders and still want to live? Dream on. Head, someone from the Nine Heavens is rushing over here. From the looks of it, it seems to be their head, Lu Yi. Another person shouted. Kill. Tianyan did not take the other party seriously at all. With his order, more than a dozen Tiger Shark warships immediately went to meet Lu Yi. However, a moment later, another voice rang out, accompanied by cries of alarm. Chief, we can't stop them. The Tiger Sharks that attacked us were all wiped out. When Tianyan heard this, he was greatly shocked and hurriedly retracted his gaze from the main battlefield. Sure enough, he saw a silhouette in the distance pouncing over to where he was like a startled swan. During this time, there were many Tiger Sharks on his side that wanted to intercept, but the other party either easily dodged or blew up the Tiger Sharks in one blow. Tianyan was slightly surprised. The strength of the Tiger Shark battleship was about the same as the physique of a cultivator who had just advanced to Yuyao. If Lu Yi could destroy the Tiger Shark battleship so easily, it was clear that he had some strength. Where did this ruthless person come from? According to the information he had, although the Nine Heavens Star Pirate Gang was not bad, Nine Heavens Burly should not be so strong. But the experience of the Azura field was just like this. This starry sky supreme treasure had gathered the shadows of countless monstrous geniuses since ancient times. Who knew when one would encounter one? Tianyan vaguely felt that this Lu Yi was most likely a cultivator from a certain era who had left his shadow here. Because if the other party had come to participate in the experience of this era, with his strength, Tianyan should have heard of him. This experience seemed to be a bit too simple. Although the process was still quite bumpy, in terms of the overall intensity of the experience, it was obviously not right. It turned out that the problem lay with the Nine Heavens Star Pirate Gang. In that case, the Nine Heavens Star Pirate Gang was the biggest obstacle of this experience. Second head, stop him. Tianyan gave the order while he was pondering in his heart. The strength of this second head under his command was quite good. According to his judgment, even if he participated in the Yuyao battlefield, his second head could still rank in the top 1,000. Moreover, he was from the insect race, so his physique was extremely tough, not even inferior to his own. The second head obeyed the order and went straight to meet Lu Yi. A scene that made Tianyan feel even more shocked appeared. In his observation, his second head had inexplicably fallen into a disadvantageous position the moment he crossed swords with Lu Yeqing. Amidst the flickering of a blade light, The second head's valiant body was abruptly cut into pieces before turning into specks of fluorescent light and dissipating. The confrontation only lasted for 3 breaths of time, and Lu Yi did not even take a breath. The corners of Tian Yan's eyes twitched, and he could not help but curse in his heart. Which era was this freak that left his shadow in the Azura battlefield? His strength was a little too excessive. Light suddenly flashed, and Tian Yan clearly saw that as Lu Yi rushed forward, a huge saber shadow suddenly appeared. What was even more frightening was that the saber shadow actually became bigger and bigger as the distance closed. Compared to this huge saber shadow, Lu Ye's figure was as small as an ant, but he carried this huge saber shadow as if it was weightless. An indescribable sense of oppression enveloped the bodies and minds of all the space pirates, and Tian Yan hurriedly shouted, "Defend!" Following his order, the defensive array of the Thunder Light battleship was pushed to the limit, and the entire battleship was enveloped in a hazy halo. The huge saber shadow was raised high, and at the end of the saber shadow was an almost imperceptible figure. Lu Ye's flesh and blood wriggled violently as he stared at the battleship in front of him. As his arm swung down, the huge saber shadow also slashed down. Giant blade chop. Over the years, when Lu Yi was running around and cultivating under the 10,000 Elephant Sea, he was either condensing his own precious blood or prying into the legacies left behind by the ancestors on the talent tree. He also spent some time in the Cyan Hall inside the Fang Blade. The saber technique inheritance he obtained from Ho was more than what he had obtained before. This giant blade chop was one of the inheritances from an ancestor called the Shining Moon clan. However, according to the information Lu Yi obtained, this clan was originally a very small one, and it had been wiped out many years ago. Only the inheritances left behind by Ho left behind traces of this clan's existence. To deal with a battleship that had activated its defensive array, the giant blade chop was undoubtedly a very good method, and this attack also condensed half of Lu Ye's magic power. Compared to the saber chop, the power of this attack was not inferior in the slightest. However, the charging time was slightly longer, and it was not suitable for a battle between cultivators. On the contrary, it was more suitable for the current situation. Under this attack, the halo enveloping the battleship suddenly became much dimmer. The battleship trembled endlessly, and countless arrays collapsed at this moment. Under the impact of the huge force, the battleship was even sent flying horizontally for thousands of miles. Inside the battleship, many cultivators were swaying left and right, and Tian Yan's eyelids were twitching violently. What made him feel relieved was that under this attack, the battleship's defensive array had withstood and was not broken. However, before he had time to rejoice, he saw Lu Ye's figure suddenly turn horizontally, and his saber pointed in the direction of the battleship. His figure spun rapidly, and with this rotation, flames began to spread out. In the blink of an eye, both man and saber turned into a fire dragon. How could Tian Yan not know what Lu Yi wanted to do? He clearly wanted to strike while the iron was hot, and break the battleship's defensive array. Having seen Lu Ye's terrifying strength with his own eyes, how could Tian Yan let him do as he wished? With a surge of magic power, he immediately took over control of the battleship, intending to avoid the next attack. However, the main battleship was not small, and it was not so easy to control. Even if Tian Yan tried his best, he still could not succeed. He could only watch as the fire dragon ruthlessly bombarded the battleship's defensive array. This inheritance was obtained from an ancestor of the Thunderclap clan. But what the ancestor of the Thunderclap clan used was the Thunder Dragon drill, which was not the same as what Lu Yi was using now. This could not be helped. Lu Yi's magic power was of the fire element, and what he used was the Thunder Dragon drill. Under this attack, the battleship's defensive array was finally broken. Lu Yi's momentum did not decrease, and he directly drilled through the main battleship with his saber. Only then did the flames recede, revealing his figure. Inside the dilapidated main battleship, there was a burst of wailing and howling. After the battleship's defensive array was broken, countless unlucky people were affected by the power of the Thunder Dragon drill, either dying or being injured. Tianyan's heart sank to the bottom of the valley. To single-handedly break through his main battleship's defensive array and almost cripple it. Was this even something a human could do? Even the current top 2 on the Yu Yao ranking couldn't do this, right? Which era was this monster from? If he had known the other party was so strong, he would not have ordered an attack on the 9 Heavens Star pirate gang. He would have invited them over and worshipped them. But it was too late to say anything now. Although he had already experienced the tyrannical power of the 9 Heavens Star pirate gang, Tianyan did not shrink back. This was because he had spent a lot of time and energy on this training. If he shrank back like this, then all his previous investments would have been for naught. Moreover, he was certain that no matter how monstrous the other party was, after using those 2 secret techniques, he must have consumed a lot of energy. He might not necessarily be unable to fight. Almost without hesitation, Tianyan rushed out of the battleship, and following his order, several Yu Yao from the Thunderclap clan also followed closely behind. Turning around, he immediately saw the 9 Heavens Star pirate gang. Tianyan was overjoyed when he saw this scene, because this guy was actually swallowing a spirit pill at this moment. He had indeed consumed a lot of energy. Otherwise, he would not have swallowed a spirit pill at this time, and in such large quantities at that. He could fight. Tianyan's heart surged with confidence. He immediately led the Yu Yao cultivators under his command to meet Lu Yi, not giving him any time to catch his breath. Lu Yi stood in place with a calm expression, chewing a spirit pill in his mouth. His cheeks bulged, and then he swallowed it whole. Under the power of the talent tree, the spirit pill's medicinal effects quickly took effect, and the transcendence energy he had consumed was clearly replenished. Staring at Tianyan, Lu Yi recognized at a glance that he was from the Stone Clan, but he did not know if he was the Shadow. Chapter 1901. Beside the damaged battleship, Tianyan led several of his Yu Yao subordinates and charged towards Lu Yi. As space pirates, they were all battle-hardened individuals. Naturally, they wouldn't foolishly charge at Lu Yi all at once. As they charged forward, they had already spread out, forming a semicircle around Lu Yi. The distance between them rapidly shrank. Some of the Yu Yao's silhouettes suddenly disappeared, and the might of arts and techniques began to blossom. Some cultivators even took out their transcendent artifacts and attacked Lu Yi. Even though Lu Yi had previously displayed extremely terrifying strength, the Thunderlight Sex Yu Yao didn't feel much fear. Suddenly, the might of arts and transcendent artifacts enveloped Lu Yi's silhouette, instantly drowning him. At this moment, Tianyan suddenly cried out in alarm. Careful! When he turned his head to look, he saw that Lu Yi, who should have been in the distance, had somehow appeared beside one of their Yu Yao like a ghost. His pitch-black saber slashed horizontally, carrying not the slightest bit of killing intent or aura. The Yu Yao being targeted was the spell cultivator, who had used the arts and techniques earlier. He had originally thought that he had succeeded, and had let his guard down. In the blink of an eye, that momentary lapse of concentration had turned into a fatal crisis. He hurriedly tried to retreat, but he discovered that it was too late. In his haste, he could only activate the might of his transcendent artifact to protect himself. Light suddenly erupted from his body. Immediately after, this light shattered, and his entire body stiffened as if he had been struck by lightning. His expression was one of terror. He had never imagined that the protective transcendent artifact he had placed such high hopes on wouldn't even be able to block a single attack from his opponent. Although the grade of his transcendent artifact wasn't very high, only 5-star, it was still a protective transcendent artifact. No matter what, it shouldn't have been broken so easily. He couldn't understand, and he couldn't think any further. This was because after his transcendent artifact was broken, another saber swiftly slashed down, directly splitting his body in half. After the Mountain Pan saber had been upgraded to a transcendent artifact, aside from becoming sharper, it was especially effective against protective transcendent artifacts. Under normal circumstances, even if Lu Yi wielded a 7 or 8-star saber, he wouldn't be able to slice through his opponent's defenses with a single slash. However, the Mountain Pan saber could. No blood flowed out. The instant the Yu Yao's body was split open, This Yu Yao turned into specks of light and shattered. This undoubtedly meant that the other party was just a shadow, and it was unknown which era the cultivator was from. Almost as soon as Lu Yi succeeded, several attacks mercilessly bombarded him from all directions. These space pirates didn't care about the life or death of their companions when they attacked, which was a testament to their ferocity. On the contrary, from their point of view, if this round of joint attacks could kill both their companions and Lu Yi, they would have profited. Lu Yi drifted away, and in the blink of an eye, she appeared beside another Yu Yao. Tianyan's eyes were about to pop out of their sockets. He did not feel any heartache over the death of his subordinate Yu Yao. After all, he was not the true leader of the Thunderlight sect. This was merely his status as the leader of the Thunderlight sect. He did not have any actual relationship with Yu Yao. However, if too many of his subordinate Yu Yao died, it would not be beneficial to the development of his plan. It would also affect the rewards he would receive at the end of this training. How dare you? He roared furiously as he charged toward Lu Yi. He wanted to save Yu Yao, who had been targeted. However, how could he possibly make it in time? Just as he made his move, Yu Yao, who had been targeted by him, turned into fluorescent light and dissipated. After the first, there was a second. After the second, there was a third. To Tianyan's dismay, the Yu Yao under his command could not even touch the corner of his enemy's clothes. He did not know what kind of secret technique this leader of the Nine Heavens cultivated. He moved here and there like a ghost. There was no way to grasp any pattern to his movements. If this were all, it would have been fine. However, the key was that the saber in his hand possessed an extremely terrifying destructive power. Even the second leader under his command, who was ranked in the top 1,000 of the battle roll, could not last more than 3 breaths of time against him. How could the other Yu Yao be a match for him? The only one present who could fight against him was him. However, the other party did not exchange blows with him at all. All he did was jump about and annoy him. As a member of the Stone Tribe, his physique was strong enough. However, when it came to speed and agility, he was far inferior to the other party. He knew that if this continued, the Yu Yao under his command would probably all be slaughtered. Thus he made a prompt decision and roared, "All of you retreat." He was going to personally deal with this leader of the Nine Heavens. The other party did not dare to exchange blows with him. It was obvious that he had sensed that he was not someone to be trifled with. The Yu Yao who had been lucky enough to survive had long been scared witless by Lu Ye's attacks. When they heard Tianyan's command, how could they hesitate in the slightest? They all scattered like birds and beasts, fear lingering in their hearts. Even so, Lu Yi had still managed to kill one of them. Tianyan had already charged over. Chapter 1902. Even if Lei Guang, who was in charge of the coordination, was gone, and all the pirate gangs were in a state of disunity, the chances of Black Cloud turning the tables were not high. If he did not do anything, He Yin would definitely be killed here. Therefore, Lu Yi only thought for a moment before saying, "Join the battle with me and escort Black Cloud away." Zishao was shocked. Huh? The many pirates behind him also looked at Lu Yi in disbelief. Huge questions popped up in their minds. Aren't we pirates? Escort Black Cloud away. What does this mean? However, in the next moment, Zishao revealed a look of understanding. He looked at Lu Yi with even more admiration. "I understand. We swear to follow you to death." A group of pirates also shouted, "We swear to follow you to death." Where could they find such a powerful leader? Therefore, no matter what incomprehensible decision the leader made, they would not have any disobedience. Lu Yi could not help but look at Zishao. "What do you understand?" Zishao said excitedly. "Doesn't the leader want to take all the benefits for himself? Let's escort Black Cloud away first, and then." He raised his hand, and made a gesture of raising his hand and slashing down. This was undoubtedly the thinking of an experienced pirate. With so many pirate gangs working together, even if they took down Black Cloud, how much benefit could they get? However, if they took all the benefits for themselves, it would be different. They would definitely be able to eat until they were fat. As expected of the leader, he was bold with his skills. Lu Ye's eyes flashed, but he did not explain. Of course, he did not want to take all the benefits for himself. Indeed, in this training scenario, the mission given to him by the Shiraba was to work together with the other pirate gangs to hunt down the Black Cloud fleet and kill all the cultivators of Black Cloud. Such an experience was indeed not difficult for him. Looking at all the things that he had experienced before, the biggest difficulty was the trick that his second leader had conspired with Qin Ru and her mother. If he did not have the talent tree, he might have fallen into their trap. This was also in line with the information he learned from Chen Xianhai. Cultivators for the first time would not encounter missions that were too difficult. However, even if it was just a training, Lu Yi was not willing to commit crimes. Along the way, he had been thinking about what to do, until Lei Guang attacked first, and he counterattacked. Now that he had driven Lei Guang away and killed many pirates, he might as well go all the way. Punishing evil, eliminating the strong and helping the weak, it was the duty of cultivators. As for the second leader's misunderstanding, let him be. It would not affect anything. The Nine Heavens pirate gang, who had been watching for a long time, finally joined the battlefield. Her identity for this training was the successor of the Black Cloud sect. The deceased Black Cloud sect master was her father in name. A father's earnest instructions to his daughter before his death were naturally trustworthy and something to look forward to. But she had never seen that glimmer of light. At this moment, there was suddenly an abnormal movement in the noisy battlefield. She hurriedly turned her head to look in that direction. Unfortunately, because she was not strong enough and the battlefield was too chaotic, she could not see too clearly. She could only ask, "Elder Lan, what's going on over there?" Behind her, a valiant and formidable-looking woman with a half-mask covering half of her face stood with a sword in her hand. She was the Elder Lan that the charming woman had spoken of, and was also the second strongest expert of the Black Cloud continent. Since the beginning of their escape, she had been guarding the charming woman's side. Elder Lan also noticed the movement over there at this moment. She took a look and frowned. "I don't know why there's an internal conflict in the pirate gangs. One of the pirate gangs is attacking their companions and is approaching us." The charming woman's beautiful eyes lit up. "Which pirate gang?" Elder Lan looked again and said, "It seems to be the Nine Heavens pirate gang." The main battleship of the Nine Heavens pirate gang had the words, "Nine Heavens" engraved on it. She naturally recognized it. Nine Heavens. The charming woman only felt that the name was familiar, as if she had heard it somewhere before. She did not have time to think about it and hurriedly said, "Let them come over." Elder Lan was stunned. "Young sect master, they are pirates." The destruction of the Black Cloud and the endless escape were caused by this group of pirates. Elder Lan hated these guys to the core. Why would she take the initiative to let them come close? The charming woman pondered for a moment. Her telepathic thoughts surged, and she quietly said something to Elder Lan. Elder Lan's eyes could not help but widen. She looked at the charming woman in shock. "Xiaorao, this is not a joke." The charming woman said, "Father told me this personally before he died. Why would I joke about it? Elder Lan, this is the only chance we have to get out of this predicament." The glimmer of light she had been waiting for had finally arrived. Sure enough, the trial in the Azura field was not a hopeless situation. Elder Lan nodded after hearing that these were the last words of the old sect master. She took out a sound talisman and passed down the order. In the direction of the Nine Heavens pirate gang, Lu Yi killed his way over. He originally thought that it would be difficult to approach the Black Cloud fleet. But who would have thought that as the Nine Heavens approached, the Black Cloud fleet would take the initiative to accept them? This puzzled him. He did not know what the Black Cloud fleet was thinking. But no matter what, this was a good thing for him. Suddenly, his body continued to move forward until he saw a huge battleship. His body flashed and he rushed toward it. Since he wanted to cooperate with the Black Cloud fleet and escort them out of the encirclement, Lu Yi naturally had to make his stance clear to the people in charge here. The fact that he had taken the initiative to kill the pirates just now was a demonstration of his sincerity. The Black Cloud fleet should have sensed his intentions. Otherwise, they would not have taken the initiative to accept him. Lu Yi landed on the spacious deck. He immediately sensed several Yu Yao auras and telepathic thoughts locking onto him. He glanced around and saw a woman wearing a half-mask and holding a sword. Her aura was very strong. She was undoubtedly at the late stage of Yu Yao. This female sword cultivator had a cautious look on her face. Although she had not personally exchanged blows with Lu Yi, she knew that Lu Ye's strength was definitely not inferior to hers from how invincible Lu Yi had been. Their eyes met, and Lu Yi nodded slightly. Just as he was about to ask her about her identity, he heard someone behind the female sword cultivator make a sound of surprise. Lu Yi looked over, and when he saw the charming face, he could not help but be stunned. This was because he realized that he recognized this woman. Moreover, he had cooperated with her in the past. It was just that so many years had passed, and they had not interacted with each other. Who would have thought that they would meet here? This was truly fate. Compared to the past, this woman had not changed much. It was just that her cultivation had increased significantly. If they were outside, the two of them would naturally recognize each other immediately. However, this was the Azura arena, so it was better for them not to do things that did not suit their current identities. Thus, Lu Yi only nodded slightly at the other party and said indifferently, "Lu Yi of the Nine Heavens, who can make the decision?" The charming woman walked out from behind Elder Lan with a smile on her face. "Young sect master of the Black Cloud Fleet, Yu Yaorao." "Young sect master, be careful." Elder Lan still maintained her vigilance and raised her hand to stop Yu Yaorao. However, Yu Yaorao shook her head slowly, and her face was full of confidence. "It's okay. He won't hurt me." Elder Lan's eyes flickered. She recalled the words that Yu Yaorao had transmitted to her just now, and she already understood. Lu Yi did not know whether to laugh or cry. When he saw Yu Yaorao, he had already guessed that she was really the successor of the Black Cloud Fleet. He secretly rejoiced. Fortunately, he had abandoned the darkness and joined the light. Otherwise, when he finally saw Yu Yaorao, should he attack or not? Attacking was out of the question. They knew each other, and Yu Yaorao had helped him a lot at the reincarnation tree. Chapter 1903. On the deck of Black Cloud's main battleship, Yu Yaorao bowed to Lu Yi and said, "Sharao greets second uncle." Lu Yi was stunned for a moment. He didn't understand what she meant by calling him second uncle. But when he saw Yu Yaorao winking at him, he immediately understood that Yu Yaorao was giving him an identity that matched his actions just now. He thought for a moment and said, "It has been many years since we last met. Sharao has also grown up." Then he changed the topic and said, "Let's not talk too much. I will escort you to break out of the encirclement first." Yu Yaorao hurriedly asked, "Second uncle, what are you going to do?" Lu Yi turned his head and looked ahead. "I will lead the way. You all follow me." As soon as he finished speaking, he jumped up and charged towards the battleships of the pirate group in that direction. Yu Yaorao was shocked and hurriedly ordered, "Follow him." At the same time, she looked at Lu Yi with worry. When they first met, both of them were only divine sea realm cultivators. At that time, her cultivation was even higher than Lu Ye's by a small realm. But now, she was only a star constellation cultivator, while Lu Yi was already Yu Yao. There was a gap of a whole realm between them. Yu Yaorao had no idea how Lu Yi cultivated, and how his cultivation had increased so much. However, having a high cultivation was one thing, and having the corresponding strength was another. Although the pirate group looked like a mass of loose sand, there were too many of them. If one didn't have enough strength to charge in alone, one would definitely not have a good end. While she was on tenterhooks, a shocking scene appeared before her eyes. As the saber light flashed, the tiger shark warships in front of it were blasted apart without being able to put up any resistance, turning into balls of brilliant flames. In just a dozen breaths of time, the originally impenetrable encirclement was cleared out, and a smooth passage was created. The Black Cloud Fleet immediately moved forward along this passage. Seeing that the Black Cloud Fleet showed signs of escaping, the attacks of the pirate groups gathered around became more and more fierce. Colorful lights attacked from all directions. This huge battlefield was like a firework feast. Under the gorgeous scenery, the aura of countless lives was annihilated. The cultivators on Black Cloud's side were undoubtedly extremely loyal. Countless cultivators were riding tiger sharks or small warships, surrounding and protecting the main warship where Yu Yaorao was. While they were doing their best to resist the attacks of the pirate groups, they were also using themselves as the main warship's protection. The Nine Heavens space pirate gang that came with Lu Yi joined them too. Zi Xiao, the third head of the gang, was greatly alarmed and uneasy. Although he admired his boss's decision to keep all the treasures to himself, he did not realize that it was not an easy task to achieve his goal until he reached this step. Originally, they were supposed to be part of the pirate gang, but now, they had become the target of attack. The reversal of their positions was really thorough. All of a sudden, a battleship appeared in front of Lu Yi. It was unknown which pirate gang it belonged to. Seeing Lu Yi charging forward, the arrays on the battleship buzzed, and beams of light converged into powerful attacks that blasted towards Lu Yi. Lu Yi was able to easily evade the attacks. Although the attacks from the warships were formidable, they required a certain amount of time to charge up. Thus, they were not suitable for dealing with cultivators, as they could be easily evaded. A huge blade shadow was brought out again. Lu Ye's imposing aura and blade shadow soared at the same time as he charged forward, and soon after, he slashed at the battleship. Compared to the Thunder Light sect's main battleship, the grade of the battleship was undoubtedly inferior. In addition, the pirate gang failed to adjust their defenses in time. Thus, the attack directly cut the huge battleship in two, and the cut was as smooth as a mirror. It was unknown how many pirates died under this attack, and the rest fled in panic. Yu Yaorao watched this scene from afar, her heart surging. She could not help but recall that in the Alpha Origin stage, Lu Yi also seemed to be invincible. Therefore, even if she did not obtain the qualifications to be ranked in the top 100 at that time, it was because of Lu Ye's protection that she was able to safely wait until the end. In the end, she obtained a spirit light from the Alpha Origin stage, and was promoted to a constellation mansion. After so many years, a sense of security once again lingered in her heart. It was as if as long as this man stood in front of her, all her worries would vanish. Amazing! Beside her, Elder Lon could not help but praise. Yu Yaorao asked, "How is Elder Lon compared to second uncle?" Elder Lon shook her head. "I'm far inferior to him." Yu Yaorao's red lips curled up slightly. She knew that Elder Lon was a proud and arrogant person. As a sword cultivator and the strongest person in the Black Cloud sect, an ordinary Yu Yao would not be able to compare to her. However, Lu Yi could actually make her admit that she was far inferior. As this thought flashed through her mind, several figures suddenly pounced towards Lu Yi from all directions. Yu Yaorao could not help but send a voice transmission. "Be careful." She could tell that those figures were all Yu Yao. Although Lu Yi had already displayed terrifying individual strength, destroying numerous tiger sharks and a main battleship, these Yu Yao had grasped the opportunity to attack with great precision. Only when the space pirate gangs that were unwilling but unable to do anything dispersed, did Lu Yi turn around and chase in the direction of the Black Cloud fleet. When he caught up with the fleeing Black Cloud fleet, he strangely discovered that the size of the entire fleet had become a lot larger. There were obviously many new warships in the fleet. On the Black Cloud fleet's main warship, Yu Yaorao was waving at him. Lu Yi rushed up and discovered that there were some unfamiliar faces here. At this moment, they were sizing him up. Yu Yaorao knew that he was puzzled, so she took the initiative to explain. Only then did Lu Yi know that the neighboring galaxy had sent a fleet and cultivators to pick them up. However, due to the long distance, they had arrived a little late. They had only arrived after the fierce battle had ended. Under Yu Yaorao's introduction, they greeted each other. It could be seen that Yu Yaorao was very happy, because at this point in the experiential learning, her mission was basically over. This trip was daunting but not dangerous. Moreover, participating in this kind of experiential learning with the body of a constellation, the reward she obtained would not be too bad. After chatting for a while, Lu Yi bid farewell and left. His identity here was the leader of the space pirates, so it was naturally inappropriate for him to follow them to the neighboring galaxy. The few Yu Yao who had rushed over were looking at him with an expression full of fear. Obviously, they had heard of his previous astonishing achievements. After bidding farewell to Yu Yaorao, Lu Yi leaped up and left. The Nine Heavens space pirate gang's warship was waiting in the distance. Second uncle. Yu Yaorao's voice came from behind. Lu Yi turned around and saw her hurriedly flying over. Lu Yi stood still. When she got close, Yu Yaorao suddenly flipped her hand, and an object appeared in her hand. Lu Yi looked at it and recognized at a glance that it was the treasure he saw when he entered the experiential learning. It was a spherical object that was green all over. The destruction of the Black Cloud Fleet was caused by it. His experiential learning mission this time was to seize this treasure and then kill all the cultivators of the Black Cloud Fleet. Take a look and see if this is a real treasure. Yu Yaorao handed it over. According to the information I received, this treasure is related to the secret of a cultivator's breakthrough to sunshine. It was precisely because of this that it attracted the covetous eyes of so many space pirates. Ordinary treasures would not bring such a disaster to the Black Cloud Fleet. Lu Yi raised his eyebrows. He picked up the sphere and tried to pour his magic power into it, but there was no reaction. He probed with his divine sense, but he did not detect anything. He shook his head and said, "It shouldn't be." Some of the treasures that appeared in the experiential learning mission were real, which meant that they could be taken out and used, but some were fake. For example, this sphere was just a prop in this experiential learning mission. On the surface, it hid the secret of the breakthrough to sunshine, but in fact, it was nothing. That's a pity. Yu Yaorao felt somewhat regretful. If this treasure really hid the secret of the breakthrough to sunshine, then its value would be unlimited. Especially since Lu Yi happened to be at the late stage of Yu Yao, this treasure should be useful to him. Chapter 1904. Lu Yi handed the so-called treasure back to Yu Yaorao, but she pursed her lips and smiled. "I'll give it to you. No matter whether this thing was a real treasure or not, giving it to Lu Yi would affect her final reward, because this was one of her tasks for this experiential learning, and she had to take this treasure away. However, if it wasn't for Lu Yi, she might have lost her life. Now it was thanks to Lu Yi that she could complete the experiential learning, so it didn't matter if she gave it away." Lu Yi didn't refuse. Immediately, the two exchanged the Azura token's imprint, and Yu Yaorao winked at him playfully. "Second uncle, see you later." She turned around and left. Lu Yi watched her leave. Soon, the Black Cloud Fleet that had reorganized set off into the distance until it disappeared at the end of his field of vision. Lu Yi was about to return to the Nine Heavens Star Pirate Gang when he suddenly found that he couldn't move, as if there was an invisible force imprisoning him. He didn't panic, because he roughly knew what had happened. The surrounding scenery suddenly shattered, and then the world collapsed. Dots of fluorescent light gathered from all directions, and then poured into his Azura token. His field of vision suddenly became clear. When Lu Yi came back to his senses, he was no longer in the vast starry sky. The rich aura of the domain enveloped him, and there were traces of cultivators suddenly appearing and disappearing around him. The first experiential learning was over, and he returned to the heavenly Azura realm. Looking around, and using the Azura token to perceive the location of his cave, Lu Yi found that he had returned to the same place where he entered the experiential learning, and there seemed to be no change. But the next moment, Lu Yi revealed a look of surprise and looked down at his right hand, because he found that he had brought back something, and it was the treasure that Yu Yaorao gave him in the end. Was this really a treasure? Lu Yi was stunned. When he received this treasure, he clearly checked it carefully, but he didn't find anything. So he naturally thought that this thing was just a prop in that experiential learning. If that was the case, then it was impossible for him to bring this treasure out of the experiential learning. But in the end, because this treasure was in his hands, he would be given more Azura seals as a reward. Since he could bring it out, it meant that this thing wasn't a useless prop. It was really a treasure. Lu Yi was amazed. Could it be? This treasure was really related to the secret of cultivator's promotion? Lu Yi carefully examined it again, but still found nothing. Lu Yi wanted to put it into his storage ring, but found that he couldn't. This made him extremely surprised. There were three possibilities for things that could not be stored in a storage ring. One was that the object was too large and exceeded the storage ring's capacity. Not to mention Yu Yao, Even if sunshine came here, he would have to be mentally prepared to die. 150,000 Azura seals wasn't a small amount, but compared to the resources he wanted to exchange for, it was nothing. In the Azura treasury, the cheapest Bodhi fruit was close to 230,000 Azura seals. The white moon crystals he had refined before were as high as 1,000,000. The Azura token suddenly vibrated. Lu Yi checked it and found that Yu Yaorao had sent a message asking about the location of his cave. Lu Yi told her the truth. In less than half an hour, the Azura token vibrated again. After checking it, he found that it was Yu Yaorao again, and there were only two simple words. Open the door. Lu Yi opened the door to his cave. Sure enough, he saw Yu Yaorao standing outside with a smile like a flower. Her charming face coupled with her voluptuous figure was really a feast for the eyes. How did you get here so quickly? Lu Yi was stunned. The heavenly Azura realm was very big, but Yu Yaorao had only spent half an hour to get here. It was really puzzling. Yu Yaorao said, "My cave is not far away." Lu Yi understood. "Second uncle, you won't let me in?" Yu Yaorao blinked at him. "Don't be naughty." While speaking, Lu Yi took out the Azura command and shot a profound light at Yu Yaorao. This call of second uncle made him seem older by many years. Moreover, he dared to say that Yu Yaorao was definitely older than him. Yu Yaorao giggled, clasped her hands behind her back, and skipped into the cave. She looked around and said, "Your cave is too shabby. You don't even know how to take care of it." Lu Yi didn't reply. Guiyi had told him that the cave could be expanded, but before that, he had to ask for permission from the Azura field. Moreover, he had to pay a certain amount of Azura seals. Lu Yi didn't have the mood to do this. After all, this was just a temporary shelter for him. It was enough for him to have a stable environment. There were only a few simple pieces of furniture in the cave. They were all brought by Lu Yi himself. Yu Yaorao casually found a seat and sat down. The small cave was suddenly filled with a delicate fragrance, which made people intoxicated. Lu Yi thought for a moment. She was a guest, so he took out a tea set and started to cook. Then, he chatted with Yu Yaorao. Lu Yi found it strange that she was in the Azura field. After asking, he learned that the Nine Mysteries Galaxy where Yu Yaorao came from was similar to the Rainflower Galaxy where Guiyi came from. They were both neighbors of the Azura star field. Therefore, when the cultivators of the Nine Mysteries Galaxy reached a certain level of cultivation, they would come to the Azura field to train. They had a unique advantage in this aspect. It could be said that whether it was the Rainflower Galaxy or the Nine Mysteries Galaxy, the cultivators might not have been to the 10,000 Elephant Sea, but it was impossible for them not to have entered the Azura field. This opportunity is well deserved. Counting up, he had obtained 2 supreme treasures. The pill gourd had endless magical uses, refining spirit pills effortlessly, and the minor constellation hall could easily create a top-grade spiritual island in a place like the 10,000 Elephant Sea. The attribute of this die of fate was definitely not bad. Suppressing the excitement in his heart, Lu Yi held the die and sized it up. Now with the help of the Azura field, he had figured out what this thing was. As for why this thing was in the Azura field, it was not difficult to understand. In the vast Azura field, countless cultivators had come and gone since ancient times. Some had great harvests and naturally, some had died mysteriously. There were countless treasures of all kinds in the Azura field. If someone brought in a supreme treasure from the outside, it was natural that it would be lost in the Azura field after death. Moreover, before the heavenly Azura clan was exterminated, they had already invested a large amount of treasures in the Azura field. But how exactly was this thing to be used? Seek fortune and avoid disaster. Defy the heavens and change one's fate. It sounded very mysterious and unparalleled. Thinking about it, since it was a die, perhaps it should be. Lu Yi squatted down and threw the die into the open space in front of him. The die rolled a few times and flipped a few sides before stopping. Then, Lu Yi clearly saw that the face of the die that was facing up suddenly glowed, and a large word appeared. Auspicious. Lu Yi raised his eyebrows. Just as he was thinking that the meaning of this auspicious word should be good, The word suddenly turned into a ray of light and shot towards him. Caught off guard, Lu Yi didn't have time to dodge at all and was hit directly on the forehead by the light. His expression changed, and he hurriedly urged his strength to check his body, but found that he didn't feel anything. Even the talent tree in his body didn't react. But what made him feel strange was that at this moment, he clearly had a very strange feeling. This feeling was indescribable, but it was a very strong confidence that was born inexplicably. It seemed that no matter what difficulties were placed in front of him, he could easily solve them. Anything he wanted he could plunder at will. This feeling was too strange, and Lu Yi couldn't get used to it for a while. But what was the use of this? Right now, there didn't seem to be any problems in front of him that needed to be solved. He did want the treasures of the Azura field, but that thing cost 10 billion Azura seals. Where would he get it? He couldn't say that the Azura field would be given to him for free. This was completely unreasonable. Suddenly, Lu Yi thought of a good place, and also a place where he could verify whether the dice of fate was useful or not. With a thought, his vision changed, and he came to another area of the treasure house. There were storage rings placed on the pillars here. This was the place that Gui Yi had warned him to stay away from, and it was also the area where cultivators liked to gamble. Many cultivators stayed and walked here, checking the storage rings one by one, trying to spy on which storage ring was worth a gamble, but they often lost completely. Lu Yi was actually not very interested in this place. Although there were precedents of getting rich overnight, and more than once, there were losses and there were wins. The final outcome of gamblers was only to lose everything. He only came here to verify whether the dice of fate was useful or not. And at this time, he really did have a very strong confidence that he would definitely be able to gamble for a very valuable storage ring. Just as he was looking around, a voice suddenly came from the side. "Fellow Taoist, choose this." Lu Yi turned his head to look, and found that the person talking to him was an old man. At first glance he looked a little familiar. After thinking carefully, he immediately remembered. This old man was the one who had shouted that it was finally his turn when he came here for the first time. That time, he should have hit the jackpot. The old man was obviously very experienced. Lu Yi humbly asked for advice. "What do you mean?" The old man had an unfathomable look. He stroked his beard and said, "There are many ways to judge the quality, judge the color, and gamble for luck. I can't explain it to you in a short time, but if you trust this old man, choose this." According to this old man's observation, this storage ring is most likely left behind by Rizhao. It won't let you down. This old man has no other request. If fellow Taoists can benefit from it, just give me a little bit. Lu Yi blinked. It didn't matter to him at all, so he reached out to grab the storage ring. The old man's eyes immediately overflowed with anticipation. But just as Lu Yi was about to grab the storage ring, he frowned, inexplicably feeling that there was something wrong with the dice of fate. So he pulled back his hand. "Fellow Taoist, you don't need to hesitate. The quality of this storage ring can't be wrong," the old man advised again. Lu Yi slowly shook his head. He had a feeling that choosing this storage ring would not be a good thing. Just as the old man was about to persuade him again, a person suddenly walked out from the side and grabbed the storage ring. The old man immediately beat his chest and stamped his feet. "Fellow Taoist, hesitating will only make you miss a good opportunity. If this old man didn't have the Azura seal, I would have definitely taken it. How could I let others take advantage of it? Young man, you don't listen to the old man's advice. You'll lose." Just as the old man finished speaking, a loud bang suddenly came from the side. Lu Yi quickly turned his head and saw the cultivator, who had just exchanged for the storage ring, standing in place with a dumbfounded expression. Chapter 1906. Hearing the old man's stubbornness, the cultivator who had just exchanged for the storage ring scolded him. "Old man, stop making a fool of yourself here. That storage ring is too old. It's not something that can be unsealed anymore. Just the slightest surge of magic power can make it explode. I really believed your bullshit and chose this unlucky bastard." The reason he had chosen the storage ring was undoubtedly because he had secretly heard the old man's persuasion to Lu Yi but he hadn't expected to lose everything. Although 13,000 Azura seals wasn't much, it wasn't something to be wasted casually. The old man coldly snorted. This old master didn't let you choose. You wanted to snatch it yourself. Who can you blame? The two immediately quarreled. Lu Yi was too lazy to pay attention to them and walked to the side, casually exchanging for a storage ring from a pillar. And after a brief inspection, a look of astonishment appeared on his face, because he found that this storage ring actually didn't have a restriction lock. Without a restriction lock, it meant that he didn't need to unlock it and could take out the things inside at will. Taking a closer look, Yang Kai found that there were quite a lot of things inside the storage ring. Just the spirit jades and spirit crystals were piled up in a large area. There were also several good samples of magic weapons. Lu Yi didn't take them out for a closer look. After all, this wasn't the place to carefully inspect them, but he roughly estimated that the things inside the storage ring were worth about 30 million spirit jades. 13,000 Azura seals for 30 million spirit jades. This was undoubtedly a big profit. Was the dice of fate really useful? However, he soon discovered one thing. After exchanging for the storage ring, the strong sense of confidence he had just now disappeared without a trace. This undoubtedly meant that the mysterious blessing of the dice of fate had been exhausted when he exchanged for the storage ring. After thinking for a moment, Yang Kai left the area and found a deserted corner, took out the dice of fate, and threw it in front of him. Although he could roughly confirm that the dice of fate was useful after trying it out just now, he still needed to try it a few more times before he could get an accurate answer. Under his gaze, the dice of fate rolled a few times, and just like before, a faint light lingered on the side facing up, and a large character quickly formed. Lu Ye's eyes trembled when he saw this, because it was the word fierce. Just a moment ago it was lucky, and now it was suddenly ominous. The reversal of fortune was a little too much. The Xiong character turned into a ray of light and shot towards him. Lu Yi was already prepared and dodged, but how could he dodge? The ray of light seemed to have a mind of its own, as it drew an arc and accurately hit his forehead. Lu Yi felt as if he had been struck by lightning. He stood in place, his expression uncertain, because at this moment, he suddenly felt a little uneasy, as if something bad was about to happen. At this moment, a figure rushed towards him from a short distance away. Judging from the surging waves of magic power emanating from the other party's body, this was a late-stage moon jade cultivator. However, at this moment, this cultivator's expression was very flustered. It was unknown what had happened to him. As soon as he saw Lu Yi standing in place, he rushed straight towards him and reached out to grab him. Lu Yi frowned. He had never imagined that he would encounter such bad luck. In this Heaven Azura realm, no matter where a cultivator was, they were not allowed to fight. That was why there were cultivators from all over the starry sky gathered here. This was the rule of the heavenly Azura realm. As long as a cultivator still had some sense, they wouldn't violate this rule. Lu Ye's first thought was that this person had lost his mind and dared to attack him here. However, he quickly rejected this thought, because from the other party's expression, he could see panic and fear. He hadn't lost his mind. He raised his hand and grasped the hilt of the mountain plate saber. However, before he could strike, a ray of profound light descended from the sky and enveloped the cultivator. The charging cultivator's figure suddenly stiffened, as if he had been struck by a body-freezing curse. The fear on his face almost materialized. A horrifying scene appeared. Enveloped by the mysterious light, the cultivator's entire body began to melt like a burning candle. Even his clothes and storage ring were melting away at the same time. In the span of 3 breaths, a living late-stage heavenly Azura realm cultivator had mysteriously disappeared before Lu Ye's eyes, not leaving behind a single trace. Lu Ye still maintained his posture of holding the saber. When he looked down, he saw that a corner of his clothes was missing. This was undoubtedly the result of the profound light. He blinked and quickly bent down to pick up the dice of fate. Then, with a thought, he returned to his cave abode. It was indeed very fierce. There was no need to verify anything. At this time, it was not suitable for him to continue strolling outside. It was safer to hide in his cave abode. However, at this moment he realized something. That cultivator had undoubtedly violated some rule and was mercilessly killed by the heavenly Azura realm. Perhaps he had signed an Azura contract with someone and didn't abide by it. Or perhaps there was some other reason. It was just that the other party had appeared in front of him and inexplicably attacked him. Perhaps he was unwilling to die and wanted to drag someone down with him. However, this was none of his business. Moreover, he hadn't attacked just now. He had only assumed a defensive posture, so he hadn't violated any of the rules of the heavenly Azura realm. Naturally, that kind of obliteration wouldn't befall him. Lu Yi sat down cross-legged and immersed his consciousness into investigating. The talent tree was burning fiercely, and a large amount of gray fog rose into the air. Something formless was being incinerated. Lu Yi guessed that this was the mysterious power that the dice of fate had bestowed upon him. The talent tree hadn't reacted the first time, because the first blessing was a good thing for him. So the talent tree hadn't reacted. However, the second blessing was an ominous one, so the talent tree had reacted. Last time, the chains formed by the Azura contract had been incinerated by the talent tree. It had taken several days. Lu Yi estimated that it wouldn't be completed so quickly this time. However, in comparison, the Azura contract was a bit of the power of a supreme treasure, and his dice of fate was only a subordinate treasure of a supreme treasure. Compared to a real supreme treasure, it was undoubtedly much worse. Therefore, the time it would take shouldn't be longer than last time. Lu Yi secretly decided that before the talent tree had incinerated the power of the dice of fate, he would absolutely not leave his nest. 3 days later, Walnut sent a message to Lu Yi, informing him that he had finished his experiential learning and had returned to the heavenly Azura realm. He could start the challenge at any time. Lu Yi asked her to wait, because the power of the dice of fate hadn't been completely incinerated. If he participated in the heavenly Azura realm in this state, who knew what kind of bad things would happen? During this period, Yu Yarao came to look for him again, but was even rejected by Lu Yi. This made Yu Yarao very unhappy. She stood outside the door and pouted for a long time before leaving. Several days later, Lu Yi confirmed that his body was fine. That bad feeling had disappeared without a trace. Only then did he send a message to Walnut. This dice of fate. It was better to use it less in the future. Although it was a subordinate treasure of a supreme treasure, there were too many uncontrollable factors. What made Lu Yi the most speechless was that this thing couldn't be put into a storage ring. Even the little flower realm couldn't store it. Helpless, Lu Yi could only find a rope to wrap it around his waist and hang it as a pendant. Today was the 3rd day before the ranking list of the heavenly Azura realm was settled. Those cultivators who were determined to fight for the ranking list had returned to the heavenly Azura realm early. If they didn't come back at this time, if they were challenged, they would automatically lose. The cultivators at the bottom of the ranking list didn't matter. Their ranking didn't increase by much, so their rewards wouldn't change too much. However, those at the top of the ranking list would definitely return. Lu Yi checked his ranking and was shocked to find that his ranking had actually reached the 5th place. The names of the 2 cultivators who had been ranked in front of him had disappeared at some point. This undoubtedly meant that the 2 of them were either dead or had left the Azura realm. Lu Yi couldn't help but think of the person he had met in the treasury that day, who had been obliterated by the Azura realm. That person's cultivation was at the late stage of Yu Yao. Could that person be one of them? Regardless, it had nothing to do with him. Lu Yi directly issued a challenge to the person in 4th place. To his surprise, not long after the challenge was issued, the person's ranking directly rose by 1. It seemed that the person hadn't returned from the training grounds yet. This was a common occurrence. They must have been delayed by the training grounds. However, as long as the person hurried back before the time limit, they still had a chance to reclaim their ranking. He had no choice but to challenge the person in 3rd place. At the same time, in a cave in the heavenly Azura realm, a stone cultivator was lying on a bed. Beside him, another stone cultivator was urging his power to heal his injuries. Judging from the other's magic power fluctuations, it was a sunshine cultivator. The stone cultivator wasn't proficient in the art of healing. This was due to the limitations of his physique. However, the stone cultivator lying on the bed had suffered an extremely strange injury. It wasn't a problem that could be cured with simple medical skills. It required a powerful force to suppress and remove it. Sunshine's stone cultivator was currently suppressing and removing the strange injury from his disciple's body. He had already stayed here for 10 days and was about to resolve it. At this moment, the stone cultivator lying on the bed said, "Elder, someone wants to challenge me." Sunshine's stone cultivator withdrew his magic power. He nodded and said, "Then go. However, don't use too much strength. The energy lingering around your injury is very strange. Although it's almost resolved, if you continue to use too much strength, it might worsen." The stone cultivator on the bed stood up and nodded. "I understand. Elder, don't worry. It won't take long. I'll be back soon." He wanted to see which blind bastard dared to challenge him. This was something he hadn't encountered in a long time. If it were any other time, he would definitely be very interested. However, he was being disturbed at a critical moment in his recovery. This undoubtedly annoyed him. He secretly decided to teach the challenger a lesson. One had to know that in the battle arena on Yu Yao's level, he had the title of eternal third place. In the huge battle arena, there were hundreds of thousands of people on Yu Yao's level. To be able to occupy third place for so many years showed how strong he was. First watch today. I have something to do outside. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.